welcome you here to the Charlotte Motor Speedway as it plays host to tonight's race, the World 300 for the G4 Sim Racing Vintage Clothing Cup Series. Getting ready here tonight for what should be a good one, should be a bit of a long one for these drivers as well. 200 laps on tap. I'm Seth Cole alongside of Anthony McCreary. And Anthony, not only do the drivers have to pace themselves, but so do we. How do these drivers keep themselves mentally focused for 200 circuits around this D-shaped mile and a half?
It's a long way to go to the end of the race, and it's a relatively long track to get there. It's a mile-and-a-half track. We've had some mile-and-a-halves earlier in the season, Atlanta being one of them. Those drivers, or the drivers were sliding around Atlanta, they have a bit more of a paved surface this time around. Not quite as old as Atlanta Motor Speedways, but still, it's going to be a taxing job getting these 87 cars around this track for 200 laps. It's a long way to go, Seth. The longest race of the season, and it's going to wear on these drivers. Like you said, they're going to have to pace themselves. They have to also manage their cars. What will the tire situation be like? And we've never really seen how far these drivers can go on a fuel run. We really haven't gotten there this season.
And of course, the track is going to be constantly changing as we'll be going from the afternoon into the twilight and eventually finishing off under the lights here tonight. And we're back to the normal no faster pairs, as last week when we were at Talladega Superspeedway, these drivers did have a faster pair to lean on. So if you run into trouble early here tonight, oh boy, it's going to be a long race for you at Charlotte. Here we go as it's Ryan Lutz and Chuck Sweeting to bring us down, and the World 300 is green. Ryan Lutz going to take the early advantage into turn one. Chuck Sweeting will fall back into the clutches of Christopher Morse Jr. for that third position. You notice the 75 is up here. Now, in the last couple of races, that actually was Chuck Sweeting, but he's in the sixth tonight because the 75 is being piloted by former ARCA Menards and Camping World Truck Series driver Landon Huffman.
And Huffman got himself a nice qualifying run. It was fast in practice, the fastest in practice for a while. Now running down Ryan Lutz, who ever since he's joined the series has been a dominant force. So we'll have to see what Huffman can do in these 87 cars. He certainly looks comfortable in them. We saw him running some solid lap times during the practice session earlier this race. Right now, keeping pace with the leader. Lutz almost got the pole of this race, but former racer in the ARCA Menard series and truck series, so we should have to see what he can do in this race. So far, everything's going really well for the 75 car.
Had a little smoke there, it looked like, off of turn 3, maybe into turn 4. I'm not seeing anybody slow on my telemetry, so I don't know necessarily where that came from. It looks like AJ DiMarzio did not take the green flag. He is currently scored 21st position. 20 cars actually took the green to start this race. And yeah, going back to your point about Landon Huffman, he spent about maybe 3/4 of the practice session at the top of the board. That final corner was the driver that he is trying to run down right now, Ryan Lutz.
Indeed so. I went back and looked at what happened earlier. That didn't bring out a yellow, but very well could have. James Goshen and Jason Hounshell got together in turns 3. I think the 85 ran a bit high on the racetrack, got a piece of the wall, and then came down into the 00. So both of them, as you can see, are a bit slow on the timesheet. If you look at the on the side of your screen, you'll see just how far back behind they are. But that's what happened to them. But yeah, keeping pace right now. So have to see what these two can do to keep the field running. Someone that I am very impressed with, it's early on in the race. We're only working on lap 5 right now, but the 6 of Chuck Sweeting is having some amazing pace right now. Not normally one of the drivers we see running in the top 5 consistently, but right now keeping his own, running in third place. You got to hand it to him. He's got a pretty fast car tonight. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him up in the top 5, maybe even challenging for a win at the end of the race.
Yeah, 2 top 10s on the season, an average finishing position of 10th place as well. And right now running lap times either similar or maybe just a tick faster than the top 2 up ahead of him. Behind him, you've got Christopher Morse Jr. in the gold and black Intimidator scheme here tonight. Man, that car looks really good here under the twilight, that metallic look. You got to wonder when the lights turn on here at Charlotte just how good that car is going to look.
Nice and shiny paint scheme, a fresh scheme that we've seen on this car. It always seems like when he breaks out these schemes, we always get a little bit surprised when he does, because every time he does, they're even better than the last one. And I got that gold shimmering is going to be amazing to see under the lights. Behind him, you've got Granary, that being Anthony Granary in the 16. Had a pretty good run at Talladega. Whoa, gets a little bit sideways going in turn one, but got it caught up before the car went around, running around the inside. That car doesn't look very stable at the moment, but had a pretty good run at Talladega. Now finds himself in 5th place at the moment. Doing really well in the 16. He put together some pretty good runs in the last couple races.
Absolutely has, and just to touch on that loose sensation we saw him have there into turn one, this is the legacy Charlotte here tonight. It's the older track surface, and with the way that these 87 cars are built, I guarantee you turn one is going to be the trouble spot all night long as it gets loose there again. The reason is, even though this is what some drivers or some people might call a cookie cutter mile and a half, it's anything but. 3 and 4 is a very stable area of the racetrack, but over in 1 and 2, there's actually a bit of a dip down, a bit of a bump from turn 1 into the center of 1 and 2. The car tends to actually get tight through the center, but loose on entry. And we know that these 87 cars with that very low spoiler, they are very loose.
Absolutely. We've seen all season long. We keep mentioning it, but it still stands true as Granary goes through and gets 4th place. A very nice overtake going into turn 1, but week in and week out, we keep telling how these cars have got a lot of power, not a whole lot of downforce. These cars have got a little tiny sliver of a rear spoiler on the back of the car, and that's about all they have in the way of rear downforce. In the front end, you have a bit of a splitter. That's about all you have at the front end, so it's really down to mechanical grip, and these cars don't have a lot of it. They are extremely powerful, and especially when you come off a transition, a corner entry and corner exit, there could be sometimes you get some air underneath the car that will lift the car up a little bit, spin it around. Basically, that's kind of what we've seen all season long when we have incidences, especially at Talladega and Daytona, where you get through the tri-oval. You see them kind of lift up the ground, and at that point, you're basically just along for the ride, pointed in a direction that you hope that it'll go. But when that car settles down back on its wheels, it's almost like a rocket. It'll go very quickly in the direction that your wheel is pointing, and if it's going anywhere that you don't want it to be going, you're on a one-way trip, and there's really nothing you can do about it. But a lot of these drivers have figured out how to wheel these cars around.
Cooper Johnson in the 14, our Daytona winner, looks back in his rearview mirror, and the battle for 7th place is on. That's the 77 of Trevor Edwards. Now, we mentioned Landon Huffman in the field here tonight, a former ARCA Menard Series driver. The 77 of Trevor Edwards, also a former ARCA Series driver, as he finished top 10 at Salem back in 2013. He's also a 4-time SARA champion as well, and he's going to move by Cooper Johnson into that 7th position. A very consistent run here tonight for Edwards.
Indeed, and he's got some pretty good credentials under his name too, so slowly charging his way up to the front of the field. We should see him cracking into the top 5. At this pace, he should be cracking the top 5 very soon, as Chuck Sweeting's kind of lost a little bit of momentum as Granary's now passed the 3 of Morse to go into 3rd place. Look at this train of cars you got here. You've got the 3 of Morse, Sweeting. Then you have the 02 of Jake Hounshell, Edwards, Johnson, and Steinmiller in this train of cars going down the front straightaway. Kind of getting into a bit of a groove. You think these drivers are trying to settle into a race pace because we're on lap 13 of 200. Whoa, Sweeting goes up the racetrack. I think he was trying to correct his car, but we got a long way to go. This isn't, for all intents and purposes, an endurance race, and they're going to have to start treating it like an endurance race, and some of these drivers are definitely getting into that mode now.
A little bit of a nugget there for people that like the short track racing circuits. I was looking here at Trevor Edwards' bio. Only driver to win Rookie of the Year in all SARA divisions in one season. So there you go, a little bit of a tidbit there on the former ARCA driver. Now, one guy that has not made his way up towards the front, and I don't think he's in any hurry, that's your points leader and last week's winner, John Whitendorf. Right now, he is running in the 11th position. And interestingly, last week when John Whitendorf went to victory lane at Talladega, he became the 4th driver this season to win back-to-back races at the same track in seasons 1 and 2 of the Vintage Clothing Company series. You had Blaine Akin do it back-to-back seasons at Rockingham, Darlington for Christopher Morris Jr., Gerald Campbell did it at North Wilkesboro, and John Whitendorf last week at Talladega.
Certainly the trend seems to stay the same in this series. If you win there, you win again, and he's got a lot of momentum on his side coming out of his win at Talladega. Number one, he's got a morale boost. When you go back-to-back at the same track, season 1 and season 2, it really does add a morale boost that you're still in the game. You still got everything that you had last season, and he was the championship contender last season. Now he's leading the points after Blaine Atkin lost the points lead. Didn't make the start last week. Hasn't made the start this week either. So right now, John Weitendorf has a net lead of about 160, make that 171 points back to the third place driver in the standings, Gerald Campbell, which will be second place in the standings once he passes Blaine Atkin in the standings. Christopher Morse Jr. even further back than that. So we have a lot of drivers that are running around around the track that are trying to chase down Weitendorf, but Weitendorf is sitting pretty in the points.
Yeah, and for John Weitendorf, kind of pulling a page, if you will, out of Christopher Morse Jr.'s playbook from last season. Not to say that Christopher Morse Jr. didn't go to victory lane multiple times last year in his championship season, but the biggest thing for him was consistency, and John Weitendorf has been doing just that as well. I mean, even with the fact that Blaine Atkin has now not made the last two starts here, John Weitendorf was still keeping him within striking distance. Been a very consistent season for Weitendorf, and just the icing on the cake, getting his first win of the season last week at Talladega. And this battle for the lead's not going away, Anthony. I've been watching how Landon Huffman had fallen about maybe half a second behind Ryan Lutz. All of a sudden, he is picking up steam. He is now less than 0.3 of a second behind Lutz, and you can visibly see that that gap is inching closer and closer the longer this run goes on.
And I want to bet that Huffman's probably gone into tire conservation mode. I'm not sure if he's pushing the 75 as hard as he could be. Definitely tiptoeing around his way through turns 3 and 4. They haven't really gotten away from Anthony Graneri and the lot either, because usually we'd see Ryan Lutz throughout the season. He'd get in the lead and get a massive lead. Not so tonight. He has kind of quietly opened up about a 1.5 second gap back to Graneri. However, it's about the same differential between himself and make that Huffman, where it's about a 2 to 3/10 second gap consistently. So, and the two of them haven't gotten away from Graneri. So definitely setting themselves up for the long run. But this time, Lutz has got competition, something that we haven't seen a lot of when he gets a big lead aside from Blaine Atkin. So this could be a very interesting run down to the finish of the race. 20 laps in, we're setting ourselves up for a race-long battle, and you got to wonder what is in the back of the mind of Lutz. He's got a very talented driver behind him that he's got to hold off, and I'm not so sure that Lutz is the fastest driver on the racetrack right now.
But you want to talk about trends? 3 times Ryan Lutz has started on the pole, and he's going to victory lane at 3 times. He got the pole here tonight, so can he go 4 for 4 coast to coast? Landon Huffman, for those that are still trying to scratch their memory bank as to where they have seen him in the Truck Series, he made his last start back in 2019 at Bristol Motor Speedway, driving the number 20 truck for Young's Motorsports, the same truck that Spencer Boyd would end up putting in victory lane at Talladega Super Speedway. So Landon Huffman, it's interesting too, because you've got Huffman, you've got Edwards, who are drivers that raced in the ARCA Menards series. We know how difficult these 87 cars are to drive. I have to wonder if there's any similarities between the way that these cars handled and the ARCA Menards cars handled that allowed them to kind of adapt to just exactly how to plant these race cars in the corner, produce the type of speed they've been able to do, because right now Huffman's in second, and Edwards has slowly, methodically worked his way into the top 5.
They have an advantage over some of these drivers in the field in the sense that some of them have probably raced at Charlotte before in the real cars, so they have a bit of an edge of how to drive this racetrack. They certainly seem to have adapted to the 87s a lot easier than some of these other drivers that maybe have come in from other series or just starting out on iRacing. They don't really haven't had any experience in the 87s. I'm not really sure how much experience in the 87s that Huffman and Edwards have, but they have definitely been able to transfer their knowledge over from their respective series to come into this one and show that they can learn this car. So far, I've seen Huffman a couple of times. He had a major look going into turn 1 the last time by, and the lap before that, he almost got alongside of Lutz. So you can tell that he really wants to get around this 36. It's just he's timing the run down the front straightaway. It doesn't really seem like he has a run down the back straightaway, but when he gets a run, you better be sure that he's going to take it somewhere. He almost, this time around, not quite close enough, but you watch him. The next time around, he might be right on the back of the 36 and maybe have a go to the inside.
And Trevor Evers just made his way around Christopher Morse Jr. for 4th. Now on the back bumper of Anthony Graneri for the 3rd position. You talked about the fact of some of these guys possibly in tire conservation mode with a lengthy race like this. some drivers have one agenda, some drivers have another agenda. For the drivers to start up at the front, they mash the throttle. They want to go early, open up as much of a gap as they possibly can, then shift gears into tire conservation mode before a pit stop. Other drivers, if they start towards the back, they are immediately at the drop of the green flag into tire conservation mode. And a couple of drivers that kind of fit that scenario and are starting as the run has gone on now to slowly start picking their way through the field. Might have been saving their good years. I'm looking back at the 31 of Gerald Campbell, the 07 of Seth Harrelson, and the 4 of James Roth. Roth dropped like a rock at the start. I think he wanted to get to the back so that way he didn't have to worry about someone hounding him for a position. He was able to then just do his own thing and save tires as the battle for the lead is on. It's our first lead change of the night, and it's going to take place on lap 26, maybe.
Yeah, Lutz is not content to see the position quite yet. He's up on the outside line. A good run down the back straightaway. Can he carry the momentum into turn 3? He does. Gets clear of the 75 and now ducks back to the inside. That was a power move around the outside, so you do know that the middle line can work if you're getting a pass attempt through 1 and 2 at least. No official lead change yet. Lutz still the leader as he crosses the stripe, but Huffman is faster, and I want to bet that he's just picking his moment, finding his opportunity as he's already going to groove lower than Lutz through 1 and 2.
Now the interesting thing that we're going to have to observe as this race goes on is that outside line. We know there's grip, we know there's momentum, but is it momentum as a defensive line when someone gets to your inside, or is it possible to be able to use it as a passing lane when you're trying to get around somebody for a position?
I will want to imagine a passing lane as he was all. Oh, we got another one trying it up down the front straight away. Whoa, goodness. Huffman forcing his way to the inside line, right against the grass to the inside of the racetrack, down on the white line. But now Lutz defending again through 1 and 2. Can he get the run out of this turn? No, he cannot get a better run this time. Huffman still alongside, down into turn 3. Now let's see what turn 3 and 4 can hold on the inside line. Huffman's through. Now we might have a lead change, but Lutz not content with second place at the moment.
Huffman drove it really deep there into turn 3. Ryan Lutz was not able to counter that. Now Lutz has to go onto the attack to try and get the top position back. And officially, Landon Huffman now is the new leader of this race as he hit the start-finish line to lead his first lap of the night. Another good battle that's going on back there is for 7th place. That's where Hank Steinmiller is trying to hold off Michael Blanton. You talk about another driver that's on go. That 24 car in the last 10 laps has worked his way from 11th now up to 7th, and he wants more.
He's trying to go to the inside of the 63. Didn't quite have the run to make it out of turn 4. Now to the back end of the 63, trying to fall back in line and get some drafting. Blanton has had some pretty good runs and has put together some good drives and almost got himself spun around and almost spun the 63 around as he got a little bit of the left rear quarter panel of Hank Steinmiller. Steinmiller continuing to stay in front of him, somehow was able to keep the car straight, as I imagine his hands were probably all over the wheel, saving that car. But Blanton has strung together some decent finishes as of late, running in the 24. He's trying to do another one here, running 8th, trying to get a battle for 7th going to the inside again. Whoa, he forces him way to the inside, almost making contact with Steinmiller yet again, but this time he's through for 7th.
Talk about how loose these drivers will get going into turn 1, but that would fit into the wheelhouse of a driver like Michael Blanton, who showed back in that special event truck race that they had here in G-Force just how comfortable he is on dirt. He's going to have to battle here on the top side against Hank Steinmiller, who crossed him over through 3 and 4. And look at this. Cooper Johnson says, hey guys, I want to play. Same for Jake Hounshaw in the 0-2.
A Daytona winner trying to get back up into 7th place. He's lost a couple positions since the start of the green flag, but he is making his way up. And Hounshaw, who's also put together some decent finishes as of late, also trying to continue the trend of decent finishes, is rounding out the top 10 along this train of cars that starts with 3rd place Trevor Edwards and goes all the way back and bookends with Jake Hounshaw. But Hounshaw and Cooper Johnson, respectively, have put together some solid finishes as of late. Cooper Johnson trying to find his way back to victory lane after the Daytona win, the chaotic Daytona win that he had. Almost was able to pull it off at Talladega, but came up a little bit short. Now we're here. He's running in the top 10. Got a fast car. What do you think, Seth? You think we might see him towards the front? Because the trend is he falls back, and then all of a sudden we look up, and in the top 5, here comes the 14. So what do you think tonight? Same situation, top 5, 14?
Well, I mean, right now, just kind of holding his ground. As we said, it kind of seems like with what we observe, he spends the first half of the race just adapting, learning, kind of going to school, and then after he's figured out everything he needs to figure out, he makes a charge to the front. So, if it's classic Cooper Johnson, no doubt, I think we're going to see him up towards the front by the end of the night. And speaking of that, we've talked about the track, we've talked about the drivers, we've talked about the cars, but we mentioned that this track is going to be going from a day to night transition in this 200 lapper. So let's talk about the weather. Daytime conditions still here. Right now, the ambient temperature about 75 degrees, about 7 degrees higher the track temperature at 82. But I guarantee you that track temperature is going to continue to go down as this track starts getting bathed in shadows with the sun starting to set.
And as that happens, lap times will pick up and your car will become a little bit more grippy under the nighttime conditions. So we'll have to see what these cars are set up for. They set up more for the early run or the late run. And we'll have to see what these drivers' styles are, because we've seen that in day to night races, your driving style in the first half of the race will be drastically different from the second half. Wonder how many of these drivers are just waiting, hoping that they can keep their stuff fresh for when they can actually start pushing a little bit more and start seeing what their cars can do, and maybe on the brink of losing control and just trying to find a little bit, a few extra seconds in their lap times. It's going to be fun to see the final half of the race. So when we get to about lap 100, we'll see the sun start to dip behind the grandstands and we'll have the entire track bathed in darkness. Right now, there's not a bit of sun on the racetrack at the moment, so already most of the track in shadow. So the track temps will be starting to cool down even now. And I got to say, what we've seen so far, these cars look so much more stable at this racetrack than any other track that we've gone to so far this season. Daytona and Talladega, they were sliding around everywhere, going well over 200 miles an hour. The short tracks, it looked like they were a bear to drive. At Nashville specifically, everyone was having a real struggle with handling their cars. But tonight, they're rock solid. A lot of these drivers, they would get spread out of these other tracks. Tonight, top 10, all within 4 seconds of each other.
Yeah, you bring up a great point there, because aside from a couple of drivers like Anthony Guarnieri earlier on getting a little loose on entry into turn one, you're right. This is about the most stable that we've seen these drivers at, which really surprises me because, you mentioned earlier these drivers were slipping and sliding around at Atlanta. That wasn't the legacy version of Atlanta. We're here tonight at the older track version of Charlotte, so you would kind of think that grip would be something these drivers would be screaming for, but no, they look pretty well planted, and of course, as the track gets cooler, the grip's going to pick up even more. And maybe that's why we're seeing this kind of pack racing, if you will, here from third place on back to, well, maybe about 10th place. You got about 7 cars you can throw under a blanket. Cooper Johnson looked really loose that time, though, on the inside of turn one, trying to make a pass on Jake Hounshaw. And that might be something maybe that we haven't seen yet, in the fact that these drivers are kind of getting the same feeling of, hey, this car feels pretty good. Let me make a move. Next thing you know, oh yeah, this is the 87 car. It's going to step out on me.
Yeah, when they try to push it, that's when they find out that these cars don't have any downforce. Speaking of cars that are struggling with downforce, the 85 of Goshen, who had that earlier incident, is now on pit road in the beautiful 76 livery. I don't think we've seen that car yet this season, so nice to see that machine out in the track. He might have ran it last week, but I don't remember seeing that. But it's a nice scheme he's got. It looks like this might be a scheduled stop for the 85, albeit a bit earlier than I thought that we'd see these guys on pit road. So maybe due to that earlier contact, he had to come down and get some repairs done as well. So he will be the first on pit road and will undoubtedly lose at least 1, if not 2 laps by the end of the cycle.
Well, we definitely could see that he has gotten into the wall at some point. A lot of damage on the right side of his race car, and that might have been what drew him to pit road. It may not seem like much, but even the slightest amount of damage on your race car, especially towards the front of the race car, which I think he had some damage on the right front quarter panel, that's going to affect how that car is going to drive, especially on corner exit. So that might have been why he had to bring his machine down pit lane, and it looks like just based on the amount of time he has spent in his pit stall as he still is there, that is the case. Some pretty extensive damage repair going on for the 85 machine.
Yeah, no fast repair like we documented earlier in the race to fall back on if something like this happens. If it was the case, he would have been able to use it at this moment, but not at all the case this week, as tough break sitting on pit road. And it didn't look like it was that much damage, but given the amount of time he's been on, it must have been more sinister than what we thought it would have been. It probably has something to do with the suspension because he hit it pretty hard on lap one, backed the car into the wall, and didn't really back the car into the wall, but got along the side of it, kind of hit it super hard on the right side of the car, kind of pancaked the wall, and then backed into the wall after making contact with the 00. So that's probably not resonating well with the back end of the car. So especially with these cars, the way that they're loose, albeit it doesn't look like it tonight. If this is the first time that you've seen the 87 series, welcome to one of the most chaotic leagues that you're going to find. Not because the racing is bad or anything, but because that these cars are so hard to control that you get some really chaotic moments that happen on racetrack. We've seen some really good spots in previous races where drivers are battling alongside by side each other and the car just break loose on them and they have to play catch up with the car, and that brings about some amazing racing. But if this is the first time that you've seen this race, you wouldn't know what we're talking about. These cars, again, super stable, so it's shocking to see that Goshen had to come down pit road for some damage repair, if it was aero or mechanical grip or even suspension, because given the way that these cars are driving tonight, it didn't seem that important as compared to other races.
We are about to complete the 45th lap of the evening under green flag conditions. I'm honestly going to tell you, I expected that at least in the first 50 laps, we were going to see a caution or two, just based on knowing how much wheeling these drivers have to do with these 87 cars. Very impressive that these guys very likely could end up making their first pit stop of the night under green. So with that being said, what do you think? They look pretty stable out there on the track. How stable are they going to be from the banking of turn 4 down to the nearly flat apron on pit road entry?
There's only been a few races this season that we've really been able to see what these drivers can do under a green flag situation when it comes down to pit road. A lot of times that cautions will come out pretty close to when a pit window is going to be open, so these drivers really don't have to worry about pitting under green. It is getting to that point now where we're going to have to see them do that. This track is a little bit forgiving when it comes to pit road. It's not the hardest pit road that they're going to have to get onto. Certainly Darlington earlier in the season would have counted as one of the hardest pit roads to get onto for these drivers, but I don't think they had to make any green flag stops that night. Tonight, mile and a half D-shaped ovals have a difficult pit road to get onto, only in the sense that you're going so fast and the angle is kind of difficult. You kind of have to swing to the outside and then diamond it in to get onto pit road. But if they get spread out enough, you might be able to swing it to the outside and be able to get on pit road, no problem. It's when you have to start slowing down with the low downforce on the banking and then transition onto the flat apron, that's when it becomes the problem. Goshen seemed to manage it okay with a damaged car, so we'll have to see what these other drivers can do as far as that. But Seth, we're on lap 48 now, and no yellow. This could be, and I don't want to say anything, so I'm going to pretense this with a knock on some wood, but we might be looking at, if nothing else, the fewest amount of yellows we'll see in this season so far, because we're already 25% through the race and no yellow flag has been flown yet. We did have an incident, but that's it. No yellow flag for that. So we could be looking at a record.
Not only that, but 50 laps into this race and 20 drivers that took the green flag, 19 of them still on the lead lap. We are starting to catch some traffic. In about 2 to 3 seconds, Landon Huffman will have to deal with the 22 of Bruce Pearson, but just the fact that we've still got this many cars running that took the green flag still in this thing, very, very impressive. And also just a little bit of a shout out here to the drivers here tonight as well, because 1 year ago when they ran here at Charlotte Motor Speedway, it was only a 13-car field, and we've got a total of 20 drivers in tonight's event. As here we go, Anthony, quarter of the way through, lap 50 mark, and Ryan Lutz, the pole sitter, has hit pit lane.
And we'll have to see if it's going to be a normal stop for the 36. I'm assuming it'll be 4 tires and fuel for the pole sitter, trying to go coast to coast. Every single race he's done so far this season, as Seth mentioned earlier, he's gone coast to coast. We'll have to see if he can do it again. And so far, it looks like the only taker so far on pit road, as everyone else elects to go around another lap. So a short pit for the 36.
77 of Trevor Edwards from the 3rd position will now duck onto pit lane. So the second driver from the top 5 to hit pit road looks like John Whitendorf, our points leader, is also coming into the 33.
So points leader now trying to see what he can do. Someone else is coming down pit road. That would be the 82 of Gil Gawk. making his first stop of the night. So far, everyone getting on pit road, no incidents. Here comes our race leader on pit road. That'd be Landon Huffman. After the 22 of Pearson smokes the tires going onto pit road. Whoa, and Granary spins it going into pit road.
Is that going to bring out a yellow is the question. He is down in the infield grass. Out of harm's way, he'll bring it onto pit lane. No yellow flag will fly. That turns the race lead over to Christopher Morse Jr. And I mentioned the fact that we've had that trend of 4 different drivers winning at the same track in the past 2 seasons. Well, Morse Jr., just a little tidbit for all you out there, the defending winner of this race. So we'll see if he can double down as Charlotte, as now he comes to the attention of his crew.
And he has gotten onto pit road, no problems, slowing it down to pace speed. Now he's got drivers coming in behind him. I'm not quite sure who those were. We'll have to follow up on that. But he has got a host of cars coming down with him as Hank Steinmiller now inherits the lead of the race momentarily as he's putting the someone a lap down there. Does he elect to come down pit road this time around, or does he stay out an extra time? He is now coming down to pit road. Can he get onto pit road okay? Yes, he can. Here comes the 2 that were following him. That would be Houndshell and Chuck Sweeting now on pit road as well.
Turns the race lead over to our Daytona winner, Cooper Johnson, who will stay out an extra lap. Michael Blanton also stays out, and it looks like James Roth, well, I thought he was staying out, but actually he's going to bring his 4 car down pit lane. So waiting on 2 drivers to complete this cycle of pit stops. And I'm going to be interested to see where the 77 of Trevor Edwards cycles around, because I believe he came down onto the apron on the entrance to turn 3, ran the apron all the way through 3 and 4. The 33 of John Whitendorf pitted out of turn 4 and gained a lot of time on him. So Edwards might have lost a bit of ground here with the fact he decided to take maybe a little bit of a safer entry onto pit lane, and thusly a little bit of a slower entry onto pit lane is now Johnson's in. Blanton in the 24 are going to be the final guy to complete the pit stop cycle.
Blanton staying out 1 more lap. So we now know that if these drivers do want to stretch it, you can stretch it 55 laps on a fuel run if Blanton stays out 1 more time. Obviously, that'll be 56, but I think that this 24 car, as he's arcing it up the track to come down pit road, so 55 to 56 laps seems to be about the limit for these drivers tonight. So that's important. Whoa, as he locks up, going on to pit road, almost getting it down to a pace speed, but 55 to 56 laps. That's about the fuel window that these drivers are working with tonight. That could be important later, especially if we go into another long green flag run. If you're trying to time it for the end of the race, then now you have a benchmark, and the 24 was the guinea pig.
So we definitely now know that based on how far these drivers went, they're going to have to be on pit road at least 2 more times here this evening. If we continue under the green flag, more than likely that second pit stop, somewhere in the vicinity of lap 105 to 115, and that final pit stop, that crucial final pit stop, more than likely going to be somewhere between lap 155 and 165. Question will be, will it be under green flag or yellow flag conditions? And I'm noticing here, I'd love to know how it happened. See that little bit of left front damage there on race leader Landon Huffman's car.
Might have mayhaps happened going on to pit road. Don't know if he made contact with anybody. I'm going to go quickly take a look and see what might have happened to the 75. Yeah, there is some very noticeable left front damage on his car. It doesn't seem to be affecting performance at this stage in the race. Hopefully nothing too sinister is happening on that 75. I'll have to check back in a few moments' time, but so far running at race pace. Haven't seen anything that is obvious yet, so we'll get back to you with that one.
Now, we were watching earlier on in this race a battle for, I think it was the 14th position between Jackson McLaren and Gerald Campbell. And I was observing that he actually had sustained some damage on the right front of his machine. He's now fallen a lap as he spent nearly a minute in his pit stall on this round of green flag pit stops, getting that damage repaired. He, along with Bruce Pearson and that 00 you see there, battling with the race leader Jason Hounshell, they have all fallen -1 to race leader Landon Huffman. So of the 20 cars that are on the racetrack, 16 of them currently scored on the lead lap after our first cycle of green flag pit stops.
And speaking of Bruce Pearson, he is the reason why the 75 of Huffman has got some left front damage on his car. Coming off onto the back straightaway after the cycle of pit stops happened. I don't think that the 22 of Pearson really knew where the leader was coming up on the back of him, but kind of swerved up the racetrack, and Huffman didn't slow down any at all. So minor contact, very minor contact was made. It does seem to have affected the front end of the car. Not sure if it's visual damage or if it is something a bit more concerning for the 75 crew, but so far hasn't seemed to have slowed him down as he's opened about a 2-second gap back to Ryan Lutz, who is now third place. Christopher Morse Jr. running him down. Hank Steinmiller and Chuck Sweeting round out the top 5 after they had some lightning quick pit stops.
And speaking of quick, that is what Christopher Morse Jr. is. Last couple of laps, he has been anywhere from 2 to 3 tenths faster than the top 2 ahead of him. A 32.9, 32.8 for Huffman and Lutz. That last time by 32.650 for the driver of the 3 machine as we watch this battle here for 5th place. Now, Chuck Sweeting in the 6 is going to lose a couple of spots to Jake Hounshell and Trevor Edwards, but he was having some heart-stopping moments just a couple of laps ago. Noticed him disappear from the telemetry, was wondering if maybe he might have fallen out of the server. He did reappear back in 5th position, so keeps his hopes at least alive here for the time being. I mean, we just came off of a broadcast earlier on tonight where a driver in a big block modified race was leading the main event and fell out of the server from the lead around the halfway point. So obviously Chuck Sweeting was not going to want to have that happen, as he's been able to stay inside the top 10 all night long.
It's always a bit of an uh-oh moment when these drivers have that happen to them, and it's something that is very problematic and specific to sim racing as a whole. Is you have the added element of you falling out of a session. Nothing that you did wrong. It's just that your internet decides that it doesn't want you to race anymore. Something that the real world drivers don't really have to worry about, and something that wholesale and iRacing drivers don't really have to worry about either, as in the real world, engine failures are about as common as drivers falling out of races on iRacing. So you can kind of chalk up a disconnection as a bit of an engine failure, if you will, because I don't think we've seen very many engine failures happen that wasn't induced by either hitting the wall or someone else on the racetrack. So a bit of a trade-off, a bit of a way to look at it, but it's certainly not, especially leading a race. I didn't see the race earlier tonight as I had just gotten home and hadn't really settled in yet, but definitely, if I was leading a race like that and had internet crap out on me, that would have been I don't think that would have been a nice feeling to have, if I'm honest. But Sweeting, 7th place, running very well at the moment, trying to recoup. Cooper Johnson is running 8th behind him, so trying to hold up. The points leader, Whitendorf, is 9th. Harrelson is now in the 10th position, so that's your top 10. Anthony Graneri, not really sure if it was due to the pit stop or something else. He's fallen like a rock. He was in the top 3 at the start of the race, finds himself back in 11th place at the moment, so not the direction that the 16 team wants to be heading.
A couple of drivers after the pit stops lost positions, Guarneri, as well as the 24 of Michael Blanton, although it was kind of looking like he was heading the wrong way just before we got to that round of green flag pit stops. Landon Huffman continues to show the way. He has built nearly a 2.3 second gap back to Ryan Lutz. Christopher Morse Jr. continues to be the fastest car on the track. He's 3rd with Hank Steinmiller in 4th and Jake Hounshell in 5th. 1 year ago, 2 drivers that are in the field here tonight finished inside of the top 10. Morse and Steinmiller in the top 5 here again tonight. Will they be there at the close of this race? We're going to have to wait and see. Right now, everybody is chasing that number 75 machine. We're going to step aside for a quick commercial break. You're not going to miss a thing of the action here tonight at Charlotte. We're going to go FRN side by side and then be back for the continuation of the World 300.
It's a road few dare to travel, a journey filled with danger and unpredictability. So why do we traverse this road? Why do we take such a gamble? Because if we don't try, we'll never know what we could have achieved. That's why we strap in, rev up, and fix our focus on the ultimate prize. Because the reward is well worth the risk. The 2021 NNSCRA Daytona 500, Saturday, February 20th, exclusively on Flatout Racing Network.
ETE Reman is the world's best remanufacturer of transmissions for import and domestic cars and trucks. Based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, our customers are repair shops, auto parts stores, dealerships, and distributors. And with 6 nationwide warehouses, we're where and when you need us. So when you're looking for a transmission that is like new, only better, instill confidence and install ETE Reman.
It's a road few dare to travel, a journey filled with danger and unpredictability. So why do we traverse this road? Why do we take such a gamble? Because if we don't try, we'll never know what we could have achieved. That's why we strap in, rev up, and fix our focus on the ultimate prize. Because the reward is well worth the risk. The 2021 NNSCRA Daytona 500, Saturday, February 20th, exclusively on Flatout Racing Network.
ETE Reman is the world's best remanufacturer of transmissions for import and domestic cars and trucks. Based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, our customers are repair shops, auto parts stores, dealerships, and distributors. And with 6 nationwide warehouses, we're where and when you need us. So when you're looking for a transmission that is like new, only better, instill confidence and install ETE Reman.
We are nearly halfway home here in the World 300 in the G4 Sim Racing Vintage Clothing Company's Cup Series as Landon Huffman continues to show the way here. Almost a lap 75 for the number 75, who enjoys an over 2-second lead. Back to a good battle between Ryan Lutz and Christopher Morse Jr. It kind of seems like that battle, it builds up and then it dies, then it builds up, then it dies. Morse Jr. winding up the rubber band for a second shot. While we were away during the commercial break, we observed the fact that Gerald Campbell's now trapped a lap down, getting some damage repaired. And Anthony, you look back and apparently 31 had a little bit of an issue in the early stages.
Yeah, Gerald Campbell got a little bit high on the racetrack, was running really well all by himself, and kind of tracked up the outside of the racetrack out of turn 2, going down the back straightaway. A little ding on the front left of the car, almost sent him around, but he was able to hold it together, so no harm, no foul. Although he had to come down and get some damage repaired on the 31, he is mired 18th a lap down, so definitely not just a little ding on that car. But it could have been much worse for the 31 because he was heading down towards the inside of the racetrack, but did gather it back up on the apron. So everything's all good with the 31 car. Another car that we didn't really know, well, at least I didn't really know why he was so far back, and then I remember what had happened, is Anthony Graneri is in 10th place, not because of slow pace, but because he almost spun, or he did spin going onto pit road, but was able to hold it from going all the way around and lost quite a bit of time in the process, though. He was running in the top 5, is now cracked back into the top 10, running in the 10th place, 13.9 seconds behind the leader, so a little bit of work to do before he gets back up to that point.
Right now we've got 15 cars on the lead lap. Landon Huffman has not had to really deal with traffic that much here tonight. That 43 of Medina is about 5 seconds ahead of the race leader. He'd be the next driver that Huffman would encounter. Jason Hounshill, Bruce Pearson, the aforementioned Gerald Campbell, all -1 in 16th through 18th. James Goshen, who had the early issue in the lengthy pit stop to repair the right side of his machine, 3 laps down in 19th. And the 82 of Gil Gawk is going to be the first driver to finish this race behind the wall. He pulled it to pit lane about 12 laps ago. He'll finish 20th here tonight at Charlotte.
Now, Jared Campbell, it's a little bit more insult to injury because of where he's running right now. He came into this race at net second place in the point standings, and I misspoke earlier. He's actually only 107 points behind our leader, John Whitendorf, so a bit of a miscalculation on my part, but 107 points behind John Whitendorf. With a decent finish tonight, he could have very easily made up a lot of ground on our leader because John Whitendorf is not doing particularly well right now. He is running 9th, but it seemed that Campbell had a faster car than he did all race long, but now finding himself in 18th place, and you've got the net third place driver in the standings, Christopher Morse Jr., running on the physical third place position on the racetrack. He's set to make up some major ground tonight. Dare I say, even cut into the points lead a little bit. I don't think he's got enough right now in order to take the points lead. He will, however, make a significant dent if this string continues on and he finishes in the top 3 while Whitendorf finishes somewhere just inside the top 10. So the points going out of this race might look very different going into our next race, and it's a bit of a wild card race, our next one too. More or less because it's a track that these drivers, or it's a track type that these drivers haven't been to this season so far. Our first road course of the season, one of 3 road courses this season, will be next week. That's Sonoma. So we're going from a very different kind of race that we've seen tonight, a long race where these drivers have looked the most stable that we've seen all season long, and then you throw them into a old surface, lots of elevation changes, a classic road course, Sonoma. It's going to be a wild card race going into there, and we could see the points shake up even further coming out of that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned the fact that it's going to be one of 3 road courses these drivers will be tackling this season, the other 2 being Watkins Glen and Road America. Watkins Glen is the only road course that they were at last season. I'm also looking a little further ahead here in the schedule, Anthony. Not a whole lot of experience maybe with these cars at Sonoma. And of course, Sonoma has a lot of runoff, but by runoff, I mean off-road runoff, which these drivers might actually use to be able to get a little bit of experience for the race after that, because we're going dirt track racing with these 87 cars at Eldora. So if you think about it, until we get to Texas, this is the last normal track that these drivers are going to take to.
Yeah, a couple of D-shaped ovals that are sandwiching a couple of very different racetracks that these drivers are going to have to tackle up the next 2 weeks, and Eldora is going to be fun to watch as well. Seeing these cars on dirt. Now, a lot of these drivers, we've mentioned Michael Blanton a lot. Michael Blanton, his bread and butter is at dirt tracks. We saw a lot of that talent shown at the one-off race that we had earlier in the season at Bristol Dirt with the trucks. We saw him basically get out in front and put on a clinic for the most of that race. And the 87 cars, they drive like they're on dirt tracks quite a bit, but obviously they're not on dirt tracks. So seeing these cars on dirt is going to be one of the best experiences that I think I'm going to witness out of these 87 cars. And I think that some of these drivers have got that checked on their calendar, including Blanton, knowing that that might be their shot to maybe pull out a surprise win, or at the very least show what they can do on dirt, show their dirt track style this season, which has been dominantly and will dominantly be asphalt or concrete tracks.
No doubt. Well, I'll tell you what, here tonight so far, we're about to go on to the 85th lap under green flag conditions. This is shaping up to be your classic long Charlotte race, which usually comes down to tire conservation and fuel strategy, and tomorrow night might be the very same thing, as it's going to be the 16th green flag of the 3rd season for the Dark Horse IndyCar Series presented by HyperX. They're going to be at the tricky Triangle of Pocono, as they've got 3 races remaining in their season. It's looking like Robert Maleska III's got the championship locked up, but with Pocono, Michigan, and Indy, the final 3 races, maybe some surprise winners can peak in the closing stages of that schedule.
It's a lot of the same type of track that those drivers are going to for the final 3 races on the season. Pocono is kind of similar to Indianapolis in the sense that it's got some flat turns, especially turn 3 is kind of Indianapolis-esque where it's not a whole lot of banking, but turns 1 and 2 are definitely have a lot more banking that you'd expect it to have at Pocono, and it's going to be pretty much flat out around the entire track for all those drivers. Maybe a bit of a lift going into turn 1 and 2, especially 3. However, Michigan, about as flat out as you can get, lots of banking, and we've seen drivers, especially if you've seen an IndyCar race to California, you know how tight those races can get. Michigan, no different, a 2-mile D-shaped oval, lots of room. And of course, Indianapolis. Everyone knows IndyCar's in Indianapolis. That's going to be an amazing finale. And if you want some good IndyCar racing, then the Dark Horse IndyCar Series, that's the place to get it. So you definitely want to be tuned in tomorrow night to see them take on Pocono.
Here's a look from the in-car camera of race leader Landon Huffman, and there you see them racing double wide ahead of him. That is James Roth in the 4, Jose Medina in the 43. Why are they racing? Well, they want to make sure they keep the 75 in their rearview mirror. They don't want to be the first car on his hit list to be put off the lead lap, and they continue to race side by side with each other. I'm not certain if this is a case of trying to see who's going to get that 14th position, or maybe kind of build a wall to keep the 75 from passing them.
They definitely don't want him coming. If they can get a caution, this would be the best news for both these drivers, as they are, of course, next on the hit list to be lapped. As you can see him inching his way closer with every turn that these drivers go through. But James Roth came into this race having his streak broken. The only driver to have a streak this season, and it was a pretty impressive one. All top 10 finishes, except for last week at Talladega. The streak was finally broken, as I believe he finished 11th place. So tonight, his streak is definitely have been broken, and we can see the ramifications of it. He's nowhere near the top 10 right now. He's a long ways back to 10th place Anthony Graneri. So maybe that kind of took some wind out of the sail of the Ford team, as they right now they're just battling to stay on the lead lap, battling with Jose Medina, who has had a pretty average season so far as the 43 team, running a very beautiful STP car this race. Jose Medina is kind of a mid-pack car, but a solid mid-pack car, so I can't fault him for he's really been able to get out of the way of a lot of these drivers. He's been I don't like to use the term, but a gracious back marker for the leaders week in and week out. Just trying to get settled in with these 87 cars, as I believe this is his rookie year in the 87. So just trying to figure out how to drive these cars, and he's done very well. Kept his car very clean. He hasn't really caused any crashes. He's been a part of a couple, but he hasn't caused them. So a clean driver and a really respectable driver. So both these drivers are doing pretty well. But as you can see, here comes the leader, and it's about to be over for the lead lap for these drivers.
We're going to have to see just how aggressive Landon Huffman is going to be here. Nearly 3 seconds from himself back to now the new second-place driver, Christopher Morse Jr., who probably would like to amend the statement of if you try and don't succeed the first 50 times, try again, because he finally has made the pass on Ryan Lutz and has put him in his rearview mirror, and now going to try and go to work on Landon Huffman. The thing I'm kind of wondering, though, with how much battling Christopher Morse Jr. was having with the 36, how much speed is left in that race car in terms of tires, because as we mentioned back during the beginning stages of that second run after everybody had been to pit road, Morse Jr. was one of the fastest guys on the racetrack.
He was, and then he got into a battle with another driver, and all that steam kind of went away. Although he's gaining it back, it was about a 3-second gap up to Huffman. Now is closing the gap again. Now that could be due to part to Huffman is kind of trying to get around these lap cars. He's to the inside of Medina, now getting by the 43. But that just shows you, if you're battling side by side, then you are running significantly slower lap times compared to if you're running by yourself. You mentioned pit cycles. We're coming up to a pit cycle in a few laps' time. That could change a lot of things as far as pace for these drivers, because Morse was one of the fastest drivers on the racetrack, lost some time, but now has gotten it back after making the pass on Lutz. Once we go into our next pit cycle, this could be good news for Morse and Lutz. They might not catch Medina and Roth before the pit window opens, so they might not have to deal with lap traffic while Huffman did.
I'm wondering too if maybe we're going to see these drivers hit pit lane a little bit earlier than what I had projected. I had anywhere from lap 108 to 112 for these drivers coming to pit road, but remember we talked about how they were kind of pack racing at the beginning stages of this one, and so of course a lot of drivers were receiving the benefit of the draft, which was helping them with fuel mileage. The field is really spread out now. We've got little intermittent battles here and there, so only a couple of drivers would be getting the benefit of draft. Most drivers out there in clean air would be using up a little bit more fuel on this run than they would be back on the initial run. So I'm almost wondering if maybe we might see some of these drivers come to pit road 5 to 7 laps a little bit sooner than what we would have projected based off the first run.
It could. And it could also be that these drivers are starting to realize that as the sun starts to dip down and the track temps get a little cooler, that the fresh tires will give you a significant speed advantage, because we're about a second off of all these drivers' best lap time. I know Landon Huffman right now is running 32.9s. His best lap was a 31.9, so about a second slower at this stage of the race. Christopher Morse Jr., same story, except his fastest lap was a 32.1, so a little bit off of the fastest lap of the race, although running very consistent in the second place position. Ryan Lutz, again, the same song. It's the 32.9s. His fastest lap was a 31.9. So, which is a bit surprising to me, because the tire degradation doesn't seem to be as bad at this track as it has been at other tracks. It could be in part to the cooler track temps that we're seeing tonight, as opposed to, certainly at Phoenix, it was very hot track temps, and those drivers were just praying that their tires would make it. But cool track temps tonight has made it for some pretty long racing, and I think that these drivers are pitting due to fuel this time around rather than having to pit because their tires are worn down.
I would agree with you on that 100% as we're watching the battle for 7th place here. Cooper Johnson will finally get to the inside of Chuck Sweeting, pick up that spot. Those two trying to figure out their way around the lap machine of Jason Hounshell, and Johnson might have maybe used the double zeros, a little bit of a pick to be able to pick up P7. Let's check in on the current track temperature for these drivers, and surprisingly enough, it's only gone down 1 degree since we last checked. Now, partially that could be due to the amount of heat that's been put into the track by these drivers remaining under the green flag. A lot of times we'll see that track temperature drop if we end up having cautions, because drivers running out there under pacing will not put nearly as much heat into the racetrack as they would at full speed. But bear in mind, we're about to run our 100th lap under green flag conditions. I'm telling you what, it's a good thing we don't have staff that are assigned to just one graphic here tonight, because the poor caution recap guy would have absolutely nothing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. He's sitting around watching some good racing, though, is what he'd be doing. And sometimes we look at the caution recap at the end of the race and we go, oh man, they had a lot of yellows. And tonight, if he was, he'd just be watching some good racing. I've noticed something else that's happened since the start of the green flag, and it always happens at every race we go to, but it's happened more here tonight than I think that we've seen so far this season. If you look on the top of the racetrack up near the wall, you'll notice a lot of little pebbles up there. Well, that's just rubber buildup on the outside of the racetrack. So far this season, we haven't seen it to that extent, due to the fact that we spend a lot of time under yellow, just given how hard these cars are to handle. Sometimes you get spun around. So there really isn't that much time to develop that much rubber buildup, but it's been green flag racing ever since the start of the race. 101 laps in, there's a lot of rubber at the top of the racetrack, which means running around the outside, if you're battling, that is not going to work for these drivers. So they have to now figure out how to make the middle to inside line work as the 77 and the 36 hit pit road.
Also, our points leader, John Whitendorf, was on pit lane the lap before. Actually had quite a bit of right side damage, I noticed, so he had a bit of an issue under this green flag run. A little bit of an extended stay on pit road for the 33 as well. Here comes our race leader, Landon Huffman, to pit lane. So, yep, that says to me right there, a lot of drivers had the benefit of draft under the first run, because these drivers are pitting about 5 laps sooner than I had projected.
Yeah, and we're going to see them just trickling onto pit road for the next couple of laps. Christopher Morse staying out that last time around. Jake Hounshell also staying out that last time around. And Cooper Johnson staying out that last time around. So a lot of these drivers that stretched it earlier in the race are doing the same thing this time around. Will Morse pit this time, or will you like to stay out another extra lap? He is staying out. I thought he was slowing down, but that is a bit surprising. Morse staying out. He didn't stay out this long last time, so maybe he's trying to push his car to see what he can do. So too does Steinmiller's Houndshell, however, decides to come down to pit road. It's time, and he also Cooper Johnson following him.
Well, I'm not surprised about Morse Jr. staying out because remember, he spent a good portion of that run riding in the draft of Ryan Lutz. I thought that he was trying to challenge him for second place. He might have actually just been using the 36 to save some fuel to be able to stretch it as far as he has here on this run.
That's some good strategy on the part of Christopher Morse Jr. If that is the case, he's now hitting pit road, lap 104, so the next time we should see him on pit road is anywhere between lap 155 and 160. So a long time to go before we see this 3-car back on pit road. In fact, a long time before we see any of these drivers back on pit road. Hank Steinmiller now following him. Michael Blanton, which remember, that was the driver that stayed out the longest last time around. Doesn't look like he's in any hurry to come down pit road. He's staying out an extra lap. Will inherit the point, not the points lead, but the race lead for a few moments' time at least.
Well, Ryan Lutz, 15-second pit stop, 22-second pit stop for Landon Huffman. I'm almost wondering if that 36 might have gone with right sides only, and he almost found himself between a rock and a hard place there too off of turn 4. Had to lift for the pitting Hank Steinler machine. Also had the lap car of Bruce Pearson to his outside, so he was in a middle of a 3-wide situation, but we're going to have to follow up on that because I think the 36 has gained some track position, but I think he did it with only a 2-tire pit stop.
Which is something that we haven't seen tonight, and I don't necessarily disagree with this move. The tire degradation, again, doesn't seem to have been as effective as we once thought when we started the race. 4 tires will only lose you about a second, so if you have new tires on one side of the car, it might be just enough to maintain pace, and if you have a large enough gap to the guy behind you, you might be able to hold it throughout a green flag run. I have to follow up, like you said, we'll have to follow up and see how the advances, because he has got about a 4-second gap back to Landon Huffman. So if you only lose a second a lap, even about 3/10 a lap, it won't be able to make a fuel run, but you might be able to take the challenge and at least be able to hold off Landon Huffman if he catches you. Blanton has stretched it. He has gone much further than he did last time. We'll have to see if this time is the right time, and looks like that still has not come down to pit road, so willing to stretch it even further to see how far he can go.
Well, he went awfully low there out of turn 4. I thought for sure he was going to come down pit lane, but he did not. Going to stay out that extra lap, and I'm kind of wondering what the strategy here for the 24 car is, because based off my calculations, these drivers will have to come to pit road at least one more time, but they can make it on that final pit stop. So Michael Blanton right now is losing about 7 to 8 tenths of a second every lap he stays out to Ryan Lutz. He's also losing time to Landon Huffman's 4 fresh tires. So unless Michael Blanton might be thinking about trapping about half the field a lap down, and there might be his strategy right there.
That
First
was the
caution of the night.
And it is Medina and Granary, I think.
Granary was running inside of the top 10. I believe he was 9th at the moment of contact. And we've now made it halfway through this race, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's true. First caution of the night flies at lap 108.
And that, I think, might have just been a misjudgment by the 43. It looks like he got a piece of the wall going into turn 1, hadn't even made the turn yet. You know, at the end of the dogleg where the wall kind of jets out a little bit, I think he made initial contact there at least, and then just went straight up the racetrack, and just a slow spin for the 43.
He's trying to give room there to the lead lap car of Hank Steinmiller. It's the car refired there as he was sitting in the middle of the track, and then when he came down, Guarneri just did not realize the 43 was trying to get low out of the way of oncoming traffic. And again, we have to mention no fast repair, and that was some pretty extensive front-end damage on the 16 machine.
Rear end damage on the 43 as well, so I wouldn't be surprised if that might be race over. Not physically raced over, but that might be a net race over for these drivers. especially Guarneri. I don't think he'll have a race-winning car at the end of this incident, as he's gotten quite a bit of significant front right side damage on that 16 machine. So hopefully it's not enough to take him out of the race. However, it's definitely going to hurt his chances of even getting a top 10.
We saw there with that onboard with Anthony Guarneri, you were watching his hands, listening to the throttle being played with. Was trying to figure out what the 43 was going to do, and when he saw the 43 coming down the track, turned the car hard left, and unfortunately, I think he was down close to the apron, down to that white line in turns 1 and 2, and the back end stepped out, and once that happens, you can't turn that race car. It's just going to go straight, and he slid straight into the back of the 43. Drivers on pit lane, well, some of them. Landon Huffman, Ryan Lutz, Jackson McLaren, and others, they're going to come down pit road. Christopher Morse Jr., who was on pit lane just 6 laps ago, he stays out and inherits the race lead. You talked about how tires aren't really falling off here, so pretty good call here by the 3 machine?
I feel like it is. He didn't really spend that much time under green flag by the time the yellow came out. Only a few laps that were spent on that 3 car, so I wouldn't imagine that's going to be hurting him too much in the way of top-end speed. Hank Steinmiller, Jake Hounshaw, all these drivers that are staying out, it's the same song for these drivers. Not a whole lot of laps ran on these tires. I don't think it's going to be enough to really put a damper on the overall lap time. So a good call to stay out, especially so quick the yellow came out after the cycle was over. Ryan Lutz did stay out. It looked like he was going to come down to pit road, but Lutz, on the 2-tire strategy, has stayed out. He will line up behind Seth Harrelson. And what did we say earlier in the race? We look up, and there he is, Cooper Johnson in 14, or in the 14, running 4th at the time. This could be interesting to see Cooper Johnson. He's got a fast car. He might be able to take it to some of these drivers.
I'll tell you who did not have a good pit stop. That was Landon Huffman. He will be back in 10th place, the furthest back he has been all evening long, as he has spent the entirety of this race inside of the top 2 since the drop of the initial green flag here tonight. 5 drivers electing to stay out. Well, actually 6 in total. Right now, 5 of them are up inside of the top 5. Morse Jr., Hank Steinmiller, Jake Hounshaw, Cooper Johnson, and Seth Harrelson. The 7 of Jackson McLaren elected to stay out as well, but I think he was so far back that even drivers that came down pit lane under this caution got out ahead of him, so he'll be restarting back in 11th place. The completion of the top 10 is going to be Ryan Lutz on 4 fresh tires, Chuck Sweeting in 7th, Michael Blanton will be 8th, Landon Huffman and Trevor Edwards going to bring up the remainder of the top 10. Lucky dog under this caution, I believe, was the 7 of Jackson McLaren. So actually that would be why McLaren did not come to pit lane, because he went around and got his lap back. That's going to leave us with 12 drivers on the lead lap right now out of 19 cars running, and the green flag is back in the air as we continue on the second half.
And it looks like everything's good on Christopher Morse Jr.'s end. He got a good restart, is now trying to put himself back, put a gap back to Hank Steinmiller in the 63. Jake Hounshaw, Cooper Johnson, Seth Harrelson, everyone got off the restart good. Single file racing down the back straightaway, and we're right back into our groove that we saw earlier in the race. But this time, a very different looking top 10 is Christopher Morse Jr. now trying to open up a gap. Ryan Lutz has now gotten around Harrelson for the 5th position, is now going to set his sights on the 14 of Cooper Johnson. Can he catch up to him? Whoa, look at Sweeting put it down to the inside of Harrelson.
And Harrelson's going to get the wall there on the entrance of turn 1. Saw the sparks coming off the right rear of his machine, so he's got his hands full for the moment, trying to hold off these 4 fresh tires. Look at Ryan Lutz and the moves he's making. I don't think he's in desperation mode, but I think he definitely is boogieing, because we know that he is looking back in his rearview mirror, hoping he does not see the blue and white 75 of Landon Huffman. That's been his main source of competition here tonight, and you might now be able to add Christopher Morse Jr. in that 3 machine into the mix, as he has the track position advantage.
He does indeed. Speaking of Landon Huffman, he is making up a lot of ground at the moment, running in 8th place now, running down the 07 in the 14. He's actually going to catch them going into turn 3 at the moment. He can see Ryan Lutz in the distance. He's now just got to figure out a way to get around some of these slower drivers. As The fresher tires definitely seem to play a bit of an advantage to the 75 team. After all, we saw at the beginning of the race, all these drivers seemed to be pretty even when it came down to lap times. So, seeing now that the fresh tires, even though it was only a couple of laps difference that most of these drivers had, it really is playing a lot. Jose Medina's on the apron around the inside of the racetrack. Hopefully he doesn't come up. It looks like he hasn't, so that could have been disastrous if he came up and put off a bit of a Lepage, but did not do that. Christopher Morse Jr. is now opening up another gap. It's about a half a second back to Hank Steinmiller. Don't look now, but Ryan Lutz closing in and trying to get second place.
Scheduled stop there for the 43 of Medina. He has now fallen 3 laps down to the race leaders. Still 19 cars running this race as Chuck Sweeting follows in the tire tracks of Ryan Lutz. They're going to make their way up to second and third around Hank Steinmiller. It's about roughly 9/10 of a second back to Landon Huffman, who still has to get around the 02 of Jake Hounshell and then the 63 of Hank Steinmiller. But to be honest, with watching him there when he was trying to make his way around Seth Harrelson, it doesn't look like the 75's really in any hurry. He's very slowly and methodically making his way around this traffic.
Yeah, he's not. He's trying to conserve his tires more or less than anything else. He knows he's got a fast car, and he knows what he can do with it once he gets to the lead of the race. He opened up about a 3-second to a 4-second gap on the last green flag run, so it's really just a matter of getting back up into that position. He got plenty of time to do it. We've still got well over 80 laps to go in this race, so plenty of time that he can get up and get that position. Christopher Morse Jr. and Ryan Lutz are the 2 fastest cars that he's going to have to contend with. And right now, it's a 3-way battle for the lead of the race as Ryan Lutz is caught up to Christopher Morse. But don't look now, Chuck Sweeting has picked up the throttle, and he's now catching these two as they're side-by-side going into turn 3.
Yeah, Ryan Lutz has been the battering ram, and Chuck Sweeting's been more than happy to follow him wherever he goes. He has helped move the 6 machine up to third, now looking for the race lead. Contact there, perhaps, between Lutz and Morse Jr. on the crooked D-shaped front straightaway. You got to be careful. Not a lot of room for error because there is that grass infield. You get off into the grass, it's a bit of an elevation change, and more than likely that car is going to spin around. Morse Jr. was doing everything he could to keep the pressure on Ryan Lutz, but the fresh tires are going to prevail for the 36.
And powering around the inside of the racetrack is the 36, now trying to open up a gap. And I have been more than impressed with the 6th machine tonight of Chuck Sweeting. Normally the 75 car in the field hasn't really shown a lot of pace at some of the races that we've gone to recently, but tonight you wouldn't know it. He is a rocket ship right now, and he is taking the pressure to the 3 car, but don't look now, it's about to be a 4-way battle between the leaders as now Landon Huffman closing in on this trio for the lead of the race.
The timing of that caution, or only caution of the night back on lap 108, was poor timing for a couple of drivers in particular. John Whitendorf spent a little bit of extra time on his green flag pit stop, lost a lap because of it, and remains trapped a lap down right now in the 14th position. Gerald Campbell, who we talked about his issues earlier on tonight and losing a lap, actually lost a second lap as well on his green flag pit stop. He still remains 2 laps down in 16th place. Both of these drivers stayed out under that caution flag, but they were behind the pace car, and there are no wave arounds here in this series, so they had to drop to the back, did not gain back those laps that they lost.
And right now, it's hoping that they can kind of rebound from getting caught behind the pace car. That, yeah, if this is your first race that you're seeing at this series, it's old rules. It's the old 1987 rule book. So there, like you said, Seth, there is no wave around, nothing of the sort. So it really is just kind of you are where you are, and hopefully everything's fine. And the old point system, the old way they do cautions, you'll notice that we didn't have a double file restart. They still do single file restarts. And generally speaking, everything is the 1987 rules. The only thing that might be different, and this is just an iRacing thing, but at the super speedways, we do have the fast repair rule that they use. That's really nothing to do really with the rule book as far as modern to classic. But also, and I want to point this out because if you haven't seen a super speedway race in this series, you really ought to, because the inside line below the yellow line that's typically illegal, well, that's legal. So it's really fun to watch these drivers utilize that and really get to see what they can do. But at this race, again, getting caught behind the pace car, especially if it's spread out like that, that is the worst for these drivers when they have to get caught behind the pace car and just try and pray that they don't get caught up behind someone that's slower or faster than them. And we're seeing a lot of it as now it's a quartet for the lead of the races. Landon Huffman has finally caught up with Sweeting, Morris, and Lutz.
Yeah, if you've got a blanket, you can throw it over our top four. Less than half a second separating these four drivers. If you're keeping updated on the drivers that elected to stay out on 6 to 8 lap older tires after that only caution of the night, Morse Jr. is still the highest of those in second place and trying to take the race lead. Next highest driver would be Jake Hounshell. He's back in 6th. Hank Steinmiller in 7th. Cooper Johnson and Seth Harlson back to 8th and 9th. So they're still maintaining spots inside of the top 10, but at least for 4 of the 5 that elected to stay out, their speeds are just a little bit slower than those drivers on the fresher tires, and they're paying the price for it in a couple of positions lost.
Indeed, and we thought that that was going to be something that wasn't going to be that big of an issue, but it is definitely turning out to be the case, and you wouldn't think that a couple of laps would make that big of a difference. We're seeing it hand over fist now, to your point, and that is some good data for later in the race when you're trying to kind of measure out, do I come down pit road? Do I not come down pit road? Do I get fresh tires? Do I get left sides? Do I get right sides only? Do I sacrifice top speed for track position? That is now considered for some of these drivers, and I think a lot of them are going to be rethinking their strategy just now knowing what the difference between the lap times will be. Whoa, look it out! Here comes a lot of them, and they almost ran into the 16 of Guarneri, who's now just trying to close out a dismal night that has turned sour for the 16 machine.
In a lap down now, Anthony Guarneri in the 12th position. I'm going to throw out a little bit of a red herring here as the battle for the lead is on. Landon Huffman drives to the inside of Ryan Lutz. Can't quite get alongside him just yet. Now does off of turn 4, but let's not forget that Ryan Lutz on that second round of green flag pit stops went with right side tires only. He gained 4 seconds between himself and Landon Huffman, and the lap time difference almost kind of comparable to what these 4 fresh tires are doing against the drivers out there with maybe 6 to lap older tires. So there is a difference, but it's not super significant. Do you think drivers took notice of that, might put that in their hip pocket for this final pit stop, because they got one more trip to pit road in their future, and it could be under green flag conditions?
Certainly Ryan Lutz is definitely going to be considering it. He has firsthand experience with it. He knows that it can work under green flag conditions, especially if you have a handful of laps to go. Definitely something worth noting that he can use to get the lead of the race. Christopher Morse Jr., Chuck Sweeting, the drivers in the top 5. Just put a blanket of all the drivers in the top 5. Now you got Trevor Edwards closing in. This is about to be a 5-way battle for the lead of the race with the way that the 77's running right now. But all of these drivers in the top 5, and even beyond the top 5, I could see someone such as Jake Hounshell, Hank Steinmiller, Cooper Johnson. They might be a little ways back, knowing that they have the potential to gain an extra 5 seconds on the guys in front of them. And if they're somewhere around the 3 to 4 second gap back to someone in front, then absolutely, if they can make the 2-stop or to make the 2-tire strategy work, then they've leapfrogged up into a top 5 position. Possibly even challenge for a win if someone happens to have a bit of misfortune on pit road.
Now with Christopher Morris Jr. and those other 4, Hounshell, Steinmiller, Johnson, and Harrelson, staying out, they more than likely are going to have to make their final pit stop of the day somewhere in the vicinity of lap 150 to 155. These other drivers, Huffman, Lutz, Sweeting, who all came to pit road under the caution, they can stretch it a little further. Somewhere around lap 163 to 165 is when they would have to make their final stop.
We got a car on the wall in the back straightaway. Sorry to cut you off, but someone just shot down to the inside. I think that was the 07 of Harrelson.
Keeps it straight, keeps it going, holds on to the 10th position, but a close call there. Nearly our second caution of the night, and yep, you can see the damage there around the right side of his 07 as he pancaked it pretty good there. Managed to keep it together, a bit of a moment kind of like Gerald Campbell had earlier on in this race, but we still remain under the green flag, and man, things are getting tight here from second back to 5th.
Yeah, that's a good example of how things can go wrong very quickly. That could have brought out a yellow, and this battle could have gone away, but there you could put a blanket on them. Going down the front straightaway, Lutz to Sweeting to Morse to Edwards, and Morse side by side. Whoa, there was a bit of contact between Morse and Edwards. That almost sent both of them up into the wall. They're holding it on. They're trying to hold it straight. In the meantime, though, Houndshell, Steinmiller, Johnson, they're closing in on this. They can smell blood in the water, and they want to get in on this side-by-side battles going on. The lap times are so much slower amongst these top about second on back to fourth, make that fifth, than it would be if they were just running solo. And right now we're seeing that Houndshell, Steinmiller, and Johnson, they've kind of gotten to a single file run. They don't really want to be battling side-by-side because they know they can run faster lap times. All of a sudden, they're in a top 5 battle that could pay dividends towards the end of the race.
And that battle for second place, the battle for fourth place, double file for a couple of laps has finally settled itself out. However, while it was going on, Landon Huffman was waving out the window saying sayonara. What was 0.3 of a second between himself and the second place battle has now opened up to 0.6. And looking in terms of lap times here as well, Landon Huffman is the fastest car on the track as they currently run. But again, it's going to come down possibly to pit road. And, you know, if we're talking about someone that rolled the dice and won, Michael Blanton stayed out the longest of everybody there on that second round of green flag pit stops, trapped about half the field a lap down because of it. And with being able to come to pit road and keep himself in the lead lap, he right now runs in the 9th position. So successful strategy there on the part of the 24. Another thing that these guys have to think about is, you know, do I try and short pit, run the risk of the fact that I know I'm going to lose a lap and maybe get trapped a lap down with an untimely yellow?
That, if you're Michael Blanton, I definitely would be doing it if I were him. These drivers, they're going to stretch it as far as they can, and some drivers do have an advantage when it comes to that. Certainly now Landon Huffman has got an advantage because he came down pit road after the yellow came out again, so he's got 6 to 7 laps fresher tires, and he's got 6 to 7 laps more fuel that he can play around with. Some of these other drivers that do have that, of course, Blanton does. Jackson McLaren might also have that same strategy in his books as he came down pit road and topped off with fuel and with fresh tires. So McLaren will be able to stretch it further than some of these drivers who elected to stay out. These drivers, they can do it, and if they can get another yellow flag, and they've been able to lap some drivers, and they have now put another barrier between them and the leaders of the race. So right now, back 12th back to 19th, we've got drivers that are off the lead lap. James Roth being the first driver lap down. Then you've got Jason Houndshell, John Weindorf, the points leader, which we haven't touched on it much tonight, but this has been an absolutely abysmal race for the 33. Not really seeming to get anything off the ground. We've seen him all season long have consistent top 5 and top 10 finishes. A lap down in 14th, not where you want to be if you want to hold the lead in the points, and especially coming off of a win at Talladega. This is not the direction that this 33 team needs to be heading in.
With that being said, with the struggles he's had here tonight, just how much more important was that win at Talladega last week to kind of counter the bad luck 1 week later at Charlotte?
That, again, that was a great win. That's what he needed to have happen. He could smell opportunity. He was second in the point standings going into that race, knowing that Blaine Atkin wasn't going to make the start. Didn't make the start this race, and to be honest, I don't think Blaine Atkin is going to make the start in any of the next races coming up. I think that he's actually made a departure from the series as a whole. So Blanton was the points leader, a very dominant points leader, in fact. And if I look at the stats, he had some really great stats. The most laps led of any driver going into the Talladega race. He had 500 laps led all season long, which makes up a majority of the laps run. Ryan Lutz would have been second to that with 312 after Talladega was over with. He has a significant gap back to Gerald Campbell, which was about 107 points back to Campbell. The next driver there was Morse and Johnson, which are in a close-knit battle themselves. So you really had everything going for you. Having the lead of winning the race at Talladega, you're the points leader with 107 points back to Campbell, which Campbell has had some bad luck this race as well. In fact, Campbell is now running right behind Weindorf, so the two drivers that are top two, a net top two in the standings, because we got to preface this with Blaine Atkin is still second place at the standings on points. it won't be that way after this race. So a net second place in the points for Gerald Campbell. The next driver, oh yeah, by the way, is running third place. That's Christopher Morris Jr., who has led some laps tonight, has gotten some bonus points for that. Could possibly be getting a top 3 tonight if the luck continues in a tight niche battle right now with Lutz and Sweeting. So right now it's all looking up for Morse, all looking bad for Weitendorf, but that win last week, that definitely did pad him. So I don't think he'll be losing the points lead this week, but it will be significantly tighter when we head to Sonoma.
And Morse Jr., obviously a big target on his back coming into this season, the defending champion of the G-Force Vintage Clothing 87 Cup Series. So everybody trying to beat the 3 car. He's not out of it yet. A very lengthy schedule here for the second season, and still plenty of schedule to go for him to continue to cut into the points lead and try and see if he can be a back-to-back champion. This battle for second place, though, there have been a couple of moments that these drivers have nearly made contact, and I'm really impressed with how that 3 car on older tires, he is at a 5-lap difference to the drivers around him in terms of tire wear, and he's making forward progress against them. I mean, that just shows how good Christopher Morse Jr. is at tire conservation. He took older tires, kept them cool, kept them unworn, and is now making forward progress against drivers that came to pit road under the yellow flag.
He's had a fast car all night long. He really knows how to get around Charlotte, so it is impressive to see just how well he's been able to hold on to these tires. He knows how to roll the car through the turns. He's had the most experience in these 87 cars, I think, of everyone in the field. And let's not forget, as you mentioned, he is the points leader. Or not the points leader, but the defending champion of this series. So definitely knew how to do it last season. Is showing that he still got it this season. Hasn't, to this point, had as many wins as he had last season. The season's still young, though, and we saw a lot of it happen in the second half of the season anyway. So have to see what he can do in the later half of the season. But as far as seasons go, he's had a really good one so far. And if he can carry over this momentum into next week, certainly I think that he will undoubtedly be a challenger for the points lead next week. Right now, though, definitely showing that he will be a dominant force at the end of this race, although he's got to run down the leader, Landon Huffman, who has opened up about a second gap back to him. He is starting to close that gap ever so slightly, though, so we might be seeing Huffman go into tire conservation mode after he's been able to get out in front. But Morse leaving Lutz in the dust almost, as he's opened up the gap to about 3 or 4 car lengths back to the 36.
Just when we think we've got it all figured out, Anthony, these drivers surprise us. You and I both thought Michael Blanton might try the strategy of staying out the longest. Nope. He's the first one to pit road in the 24 machine. Gerald Campbell in the 31 just came down pit lane, and I think he's actually brought that car back to the garage area. I saw just in camera shot about 15 laps ago, he knocked down the outside wall off of turn 4 again, so a lot more damage on his 31, and he has called it an early night, closing in on 50 laps to go.
And I'm looking at the 24 right now, and it's not all sunshine and rainbows down at the 24 camp. The right side of that car has got some pretty significant damage on the front end of it, so he might have also found the outside wall and ended up having some damage and have to come down and repair that because no one else has come down pit road. There's still quite a significant amount of damage on the front right of that car, so I would imagine that was an unscheduled stop on the part of the 24 team, knowing that they had to come down and get that repaired if they wanted to stay somewhat competitive going forward, as now he's going to be trapped a lap down as well.
But the fuel window is open for these drivers now to come down pit lane and make it the rest of the way on fuel. As mentioned, for drivers like Christopher Morse Jr., they're only about 5 laps away from when they absolutely are going to have to come to pit road for fuel. The other drivers about 5 to 8 laps further than that. So now the question is here, if you're that 3 of Christopher Morse Jr., can you, with coming down pit lane, let's say about 5 laps earlier than drivers like Landon Huffman, can you gain that ground back, maybe cycle around as the race leader, as Chuck Sweeting, Cooper Johnson are now on pit road? These are drivers who did pit under the last and only caution.
So they might be trying the short pit strategy. We saw, again, we keep mentioning Blanton. We use Blanton as a bit of a point of reference. He was able to go 55 laps on a stint, and then he was able to go about 57 laps on the next stint. So it is possible that if you pit now with a little bit of fuel saving, you could probably try to stretch to the end of the race. It might be a bit of a tall task at this stage, as you'd have to go somewhere close to 60 laps, or it'd be about 50 laps, never mind, it'd be about 50 laps to the end of the race. So at this stage of the race, you can stretch it. So I wouldn't imagine that we wouldn't see some drivers try to do that. Certainly some that are pitting so early, trying to stretch the advantage.
Trevor Edwards down pit road, and I don't know what happened on that 24, but Michael Blanton has now retired out of the race. Looks like he will finish in 18th. Campbell will finish in 19th. Race leader Landon Huffman coming to pit lane. And folks, take a look at the front tires on this car. So what I love about the nighttime racing, because you don't really get to see this in the daytime. Look at how those brake rotors are glowing bright red.
They have been using the brakes a lot this race. Something that you don't see much with the modern day cars is that braking is kind of, all you have to do is roll off the throttle a little bit at some of these tracks. But these cars, you got to get on the brakes at least a little bit. But even that little bit is going to start the tires to glow. And we are now fully into nighttime as all the lights are on the racetrack, and the entire track is flooded with light, as I think some drivers might have tried a different strategy. Ryan Lutz, another 2-tire stop this time, or if it was a 4-tire stop, certainly a much faster one than Landon Huffman, as he's now going to come off pit road first.
Teammates actually rolled the dice on 2-tire strategy. Ryan Lutz and Hank Steinmiller. Right sides only here for this final pit stop of the evening, potentially, with 47 laps to go. Seth Harrelson still has yet to come down pit lane, but he'll get himself a bonus point for his first lap led here tonight. So the stage is now set, barring a caution flag coming out, of who's got the best race car for this final stint. Whoa, there, Harrelson almost getting into the back of the 4 of James Roth, and while we're waiting for that 07 to come down pit road, Anthony, let's do a little bit of a guessing game. So we checked at the start of this race. Track temp was at 82. We checked a little bit later near the halfway point. It was down to 81. We've only had one caution between then and now. What do you think the track temp might be now as we've entered into full nighttime conditions?
I would dare say that we're probably down into the high 70s. I wouldn't imagine that the track temp would have cooled down significantly, but I do think it's cooled down enough that we've at least gotten to 79, 78 degrees.
All right, I'll go a little lower. I'll go 77, and survey says it is 79. Hey, look at that. Anthony with the call right there. 79 degrees, about 5 degrees higher than the ambient temperature of 74 degrees. And again, too, a big reason we probably, if we had, let's say, 4 or 5 cautions tonight, we'd probably be looking at the mid-70s for track temperature. Just the fact, though, that this track has been kept warm with how many green flag laps we've run here tonight has kept the track temperature up.
It has, and that was surprising for me, too. I'm not normally good at guessing games, so kind of surprised myself a little bit on that one. But
now we got to have you guess the winner.
I'm not going to. The last time I did that, bad things happened. We're not going to do that one tonight. I do have some people that I'm eyeing for the win of this race, given based off of what we've seen in the last couple of laps. So I won't say anything. I'm not going to bring the commentator's curse to the airwaves, but what I will say is I'm impressed with a few drivers, specifically in the top 5. The track also, we've noticed this hand over fist in this race more than we have the last time we were out. And I know I mentioned it earlier, but look at the inside line now. There's a lot of rubber buildup on the inside of the racetrack, so you've got a very distinct green line in the middle of the track that's all rubbered in. On the outside and the very inside of the apron, which it might be the reason why we've seen some drivers have some issues when slapping the wall on the outside of turn 2, is you get up into that rough stuff and you got a one-way ticket up into the wall. So we have been under green so long tonight, we've had the chance to build up that kind of rubber, and it's kind of weird to see it. There is a very distinct line in the middle of the racetrack, which is something we haven't really seen all season long.
Cycle of pit stops now complete as Seth Harrelson has brought his car to pit lane. Looks like he's going to cycle around in the 12th position, and that will be the last car on the lead lap. Bruce Pearson, John Whitendorf, 1 lap down apiece. Jose Medina is currently 2 laps down, and James Goshen is 4 laps down. Anthony Guarneri in the 16 is actually on pit road again. Long extended stay for him. Right now, he's holding down the 19th position. Michael Blanton, Gerald Campbell, and Gil Gawk out of the race as we watch this battle for the 3rd position. And while it's a great battle for the fans to watch, it's not helping these two drivers because they're running either just a tick quicker or same lap times as Ryan Lutz and Hank Steinmiller. And oh yeah, by the way, those top two went with right sides only. So they are holding off these other two drivers with left side tires that have been run for over 50 laps.
And they got a lot of work if they want to catch up to the 36 and the 63 as they continue to battle on the racetrack. Something that is helping the 63 too is that he's been able to run consistent lap times ever since the final round of pit stops. He's been able to just kind of run his own race. Not really. This is the first time that he's been by himself this entire race. He's been in a group of cars since the green flag. And now he finds stuff in clean air, so we're really getting to see what he had in his playbook as far as running around the racetrack. He's a long ways back to his teammate, about 4 seconds back. He's 2.5, maybe a little bit more than 2.5 seconds back to Huffman and Morse. I would dare say that Steinmiller, if nothing changes, if not second place, will probably be a top 3 contender. He's shown a lot of pace ever since the final round of stops. Someone who's went backwards is going to be Chuck Sweeting, who was up battling for the lead of the race before the yellow flag came out, and even after the yellow flag came out, after this last round of green flag stops, now is running 6th place for the 6th car. So a lot of work if he needs to catch back up to that. And I will say this. We were talking about the streak. It might be back on. James Roth has somehow found his way into 9th, and I'm not really sure how he's managed to do that given the night he's had, but he's also back on the lead lap too, so good on him for that. That number 4 Crisco car trying to keep the streak, or trying to start a new streak, if you will.
Well, I'll tell you why he is where he is, and unfortunately it's not all good news, is the fact that James Roth is still out there on 53-lap-old tires. He stretched it as far as the fuel window would allow him, as far as his fuel tank would allow him, maybe hoping that a caution would save him, get him back in the lead lap. Right now, running in the 9th position. Another driver that was also trying the same strategy, Jason Hounshaw, has now brought his car down pit lane. So Roth is going to have to come to pit road, which he is going to do now. This will now put him back off the lead lap again. So a valiant strategy. It could have very well worked out, but unfortunately, James Roth not getting the caution that he needed. And I'm looking at lap times here, Anthony, as well. Landon Huffman, Christopher Morse Jr., they're gaining in the hundreds. And they are 6.5 and 7 seconds, respectively, behind Ryan Lutz. With 36 laps to go, and the fact that we're not seeing a whole lot of gaining going on for either the 3rd or 4th place driver, plus the fact they've got 2nd place Hank Steinmiller, who for sure is going to be playing defense for his teammate, I gotta say, I'm really shocked that we only had a handful of drivers go with the 2-tire strategy. I would have thought for sure Landon Huffman, obviously he doesn't have the data that we have up here in the booth, but he should have been, I would think, able to notice that Ryan Lutz was able to be 3 seconds behind him, and then after pit stops, 4 seconds ahead of him. Should have put 2 and 2 together. That was a right side tire, 2-tire pit stop for the 36. I'm really shocked that he did not go with a right side tire strategy here, since Lutz seemed to kind of play his hand early.
He did. He played it he was experimenting with whether or not he could make it work very early on in the race. And like you said, he really did show his hand a bit too early that I thought he would have, but it doesn't seem like anyone took the bait, and the only one that did was his teammate. So you got to think that they communicated with each other at the very least. These drivers, people seem to sometimes will think that these drivers all get into a big Discord call together. They do not. They have their own team chats. So Ryan Lutz and Hank Steinmiller can talk to each other. So obviously Ryan was able to tell Hank, hey, I'm doing 2 tires. Why don't you do it too? Because it really doesn't affect your lap times that much. And you can get a big lead by doing so. So Hank was able to do it. Landon Huffman, not so much. He had none the wiser what Ryan Lutz and Steinmiller were doing. Neither was Christopher Morse Jr. So they weren't able to make the call, and subsequently, they've found...
Oh, James Roth, sorry to cut you off. I thought our third place driver was getting wrecked there because Roth got loose off of 2. I thought he was going to hook the 75. You can continue on while I restart my heart here. Gracious.
Woo. That happened right in front of where I was looking too, and I didn't really see what happened. Goodness. And he's still not slowing down. He's going to try and get around the 75 again. He's a man on a mission, that Ford machine is. But, yeah, so not really knowing what these other drivers are doing, they got to work it out in their head, and there's a lot of pressure on these drivers in the middle of a race. Sometimes you just miss some things, and a lot of drivers miss out on the big opportunity, but right now, Roth is not doing any favors to the 75 of Huffman. He's been a bit of a bother more than he is helping.
Well, James Roth right now is 2 laps down in 13th place, but he has fresh tires behind the 75. And so I'm a little surprised that Landon Huffman wasn't yielding to the 4, let him get up there, because, James Roth could actually be an asset to Landon Huffman. Let him by, have him get up there in the vicinity of Hank Steinmiller, put the pressure on the 63. Next thing you know, you might be reeling him in for a second place battle.
Yeah, that very true. But, don't tell that to Roth. he wants to make it as hard as he possibly can, and right now we got a bit of another issue that Roth and Huffman are going to have to deal with momentarily, and they've got a couple cars in front of them that is kind of sandwiching the second place and third place driver, and that is one of the Houndshells and the points leader. John Whitendorf now 2 laps down. Jason Houndshell also 2 laps down. These drivers are in the midst of a pretty big battle right now. I believe they've come down pit road since the last cycle of green flag stops. Not really sure why. Maybe they got to figuring it out and they realized that maybe on fuel they couldn't make it to the end of the race. So now they came down pit road to get some fresh tires and fuel, because they are wheeling around these drivers like they just came down pit road. Are they short on fuel is the question, these leaders. I don't think they are, but it is a bit of a stretch. We know that you can make it 55 laps, and we were within 50 laps, but with how hard you have to battle, is it going to be enough?
These drivers were last on pit road, if we look at Ryan Lutz, back on lap 153, and I believe that they went about 50 laps on that stint, so they should be good to make it on fuel, projected, but again, as well, as we mentioned, the projected number actually goes lower the longer a driver spends out in clean air without the aid of draft. And Ryan Lutz...
Weindorf's going around at the hands of the 75, but they save it! Goodness me, sorry to cut you off, but there was major contact between Huffman and Whitendorf, but no yellow.
And that's going to be Morse that's going to try and capitalize. Oh, and now the 33 spins it again. Caution's going to come out. Huffman tried the inside once more. Could not make it work. This is not the caution that Lutz and Steinmiller wanted to see.
That was, we were talking about, could they make it on fuel? Well, there's no question now. They definitely can, and they are definitely going to come down and get some tires on those race cars. I want to bet that might have been retaliation on the part of the 75, because that did not look like an accident the second time around.
Let's go back and take a look. We missed the initial contact that Anthony brought to us. We'll take a look at that. Oh my goodness. Yeah, how in the world did they keep those going? This was into turn 3. Huffman drives it deep. Whitendorf kind of cut down in front there on the 33. Both cars keep it together, and while I'm kind of in agreement with you, the 75 was frustrated. Let's bear in mind as well, though, just how drivers have to approach this D-shaped front straightaway. A lot of times you'll have this kind of contact take place. Wow, there's a lot of gray area there. There's a lot of room for interpretation.
I'm willing to side with you on this, and I don't think it was retaliation, because Morris had a whale of a run, and he went to the outside line, basically cutting off the chances for Huffman to really go to the outside to avoid the 33, and unfortunately, Whitendorf was just caught in a bad place. Whitendorf did undoubtedly come down onto Huffman going through the tri-oval. However, I don't think there was much he could do, because he was getting pinched by Morse by that time. So, that's a really tough one to call. It is unfortunate, though, for the 75 of Huffman. He had a dominant car all night long, and now he's got damage and will undoubtedly need tires.
Well, he does have that right front damage after the contact between himself and the 33. The good news is, as his car spun down to the inside of turn 1, he did not hit the wall, so he might be okay. I am a little bit surprised here. We did have some gamblers here deciding to stay out. Had some drivers that came to pit lane. One of those is the 75 of Landon Huffman, electing to stay out along with Trevor Edwards and race leader Ryan Lutz. Everybody else came down pit road to put on a fresh set of tires. While for Ryan Lutz and Trevor Edwards, they basically seemed committed to this strategy. I am a little perplexed after spinning out practically not once but twice in the span of a lap, why the 75 did not come down pit lane.
That his tires are going to be screaming at him after that spin. Now, I don't know if it's going to be enough to really make that much of a difference. After all, Ryan Lutz has not changed his left side tires in about 100 laps. He is running out there with basically 100 lap old left side tires. So as far as that goes, you can make worn tires work, but the difference is that Landon Huffman's going to have all of his tires on fire as opposed to just one side of them. So tough call for the 75. He might know something that we don't know. Certainly these drivers know that they can make it to the end of the race, being able to save some fuel under this pacing period. Only the second yellow tonight, so a lot of time for these drivers to kind of recoup and figure out what they're going to do. Christopher Morris Jr. now back in 4th place. We got to give a little bit of a joker, if you will, into this top 3. Look who's running in 2nd. We haven't seen Trevor Edwards in a long time up in the top 5. Now finds himself in 2nd place, no damage, relatively fresh tires, and he was faster than Ryan Lutz in some parts of the racetrack the last run. So do we see this 77 pulling out a bit of a gotcha win?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because you got your top 4 with entirely different scenarios in terms of the tires underneath them. For Lutz, as you mentioned, 100-lap left side tires, 25-lap right side tires. For Trevor Edwards, his lefts and rights, 25 laps on those. For Landon Huffman, question mark. We're not even going to guess based off of the wear that he would have gotten in those 2 spins just exactly how worn those tires are. And then 4th place, first driver off pit road with fresh Goodyears, Christopher Morse Jr. trying to go back-to-back here at Charlotte with Hank Steinmiller, Chuck Sweeting, Jake Hounshell, Cooper Johnson, Jackson McLaren, and Seth Harles in the top 10. Those are the drivers that are on the lead lap. Jason Hounshell got the lucky dog, but only gets one of his laps back. He was -2, so he'll be the only car 1 lap down. He's looking to the skies, hoping for another quickie yellow to have 11 cars on the lead lap before this race is over.
And then the rest of the field was Roth, points leader Whitendorf involved in that last caution, finds himself 13th. Pearson, Medina, and Goshen, the last drivers on the racetrack, and then retired from the race 17th through 20th. Got Blanton, Campbell, who came into this race a net 2nd place in the standings. Granary and Gawk will be our retirees. Green flag back in the air. Lutz, a great restart off of the green flag. Kind of left Edwards in the dust. Left everyone in the dust back from Huffman to Morse, as Morse did not get a good restart.
Did not get a good restart, but has the fresh tires, so we'll see if he can make a forward charge here against the top 3. You can see right there the speed differential. He was hitting about 183 going into turn 3. The other drivers were lucky if they were able to top 179. Look at the run Morse gets on Huffman here out of turn 4.
He is definitely a man on a mission. Those fresh tires were the best thing that could have happened to the 3 machine, as he now has a grip advantage. He can basically put his car wherever he needs to in order to get around these guys around the outside of the racetrack. Look at the power move around the outside, ringing around where the rubber is to the outside of Huffman. Gets him down, now goes to the 77. Can he put Edwards down?
High, wide, and handsome for Christopher Morse Jr. Look how soon he's able to get back to the throttle through the center of 3 and 4. That's his advantage off the corner. Clears the 77 down at the start-finish line. Only one more car to beat. It's Ryan Lutz in the 36, and he's only 2 car lengths ahead.
20 laps to go. He's got plenty of time, and he's got plenty of tire in order to get to the leader. Now battle for third place between Edwards and Huffman. A battle for the lead brewing between Morse Jr. and Ryan Lutz. The defending champion knows that he needs to get to the lead of the race and needs to get better in the points. He could be walking out of this race, basically knocking at Whitendorf's door for the points lead, if not taking it at the end of this race. So he's got extra motivation going for a second championship. It's still early in the season, but he is in that position where he can set himself up for this championship. But right now, 36 is not content to let him by as he takes him right to the wall.
Pinches him down towards that white line as well, but Morse Jr. is there. He's got the inside line into turn 3, and he might make very quick work of Ryan Lutz to move to the point. Landon Huffman got around Edwards for the 3rd position. Fresh tires of Hank Steinmiller on the back bumper of them both, trying to move up into the podium. And Lutz isn't going away quietly. He says, hey, buddy, you want back-to-back wins at Charlotte? It's not going to be a gimme. You're going to have to battle me for it.
He tried the crossover, but Morse just enough grip to get the power down on the middle line of the racetrack. Now Lutz is just trying to figure out, where do I make the move now? He's got a run going into the 3 and 4, but now that Christopher Morse is clear. He's able to get to the inside line, the preferred line, and look at the rocket he got off of turn 4 at the line. It's about 3 car lengths back to Lutz, and it's only going to get larger from here, as now he has got clean air, plenty of racetrack in front of him, and fresh tires to boot. I think that is the beginning of the end for the race.
Wow, have you got 2 sheets of paper? Because I'd love to measure the distance between the passenger side door of the 63, the driver's side door of the 77, and then the front and rear bumpers of those cars when Steinmiller made that pass for 4th. That was about as close as you can make that pass without the 2 cars wrecking. And for Steinmiller, he's trying to get going here because he's the 2nd highest driver on fresh tires. He doesn't want the 3 of Morse Jr. to get away too quickly.
Indeed, he does not. Whoa! That could have been contact. It almost was contact, but now it's bringing in a bunch of cars behind him. You got Houndshell, you've got Johnson, and you've got the 7 of McLaren now showing themselves up in this battle for 4th place. And this is big for Hank Steinmiller. He comes into this race mired back 8th in the point standings. He needs to get himself going if he wants to get going towards the championship. This is his rookie year, so he's the highest running rookie right now, doing fantastic as the 63. I wouldn't imagine that he's having the race of his life right now. This is the best run he's had since, I believe, back at Rockingham, where he got a top 5. So good morale boost going out of this race would be for the 63 if he can indeed get to the top 3. But look at this hornet's nest. Oh, there's some contact a little bit between him and the 77. This is getting tight up here for the 4th place position.
Well, while I'll disagree with you that he isn't a rookie, he did run full-time last season, was a mainstay up inside the top 5 in the standings. I will agree with you, though, on the fact this is a tremendous run for him. Based off of what he was able to do last season, this has not seemed to be the same Hank Steinmiller from a year ago. I don't know if it's just been the fact of the competition here in the series in Season 2, or just the fact that luck has not gone his way, but a solid outing nonetheless for him as he's moments away from reeling in his teammate Ryan Lutz. He's got a lot of friends to bring with him as well that all are on fresh tires. Houndshell, Cooper Johnson, I mean, we talked about it back at the drop of the green flag. He does this every single race. He kind of lingers outside the latter half of the top 10. Next thing you know, we get into the latter stages of the race. He's up there knocking on the door of a top 5. He's doing it again here tonight at Charlotte.
And I will apologize because according to the point standings I got in front of me, it's he's still got the rookie tag next to him. And I should have known that. You told me that at the beginning of the season, but I forgot. So sorry to Hank Steinmiller. Didn't mean to disrespect you in that way, but still, good run for him. He can get this season going. But yeah, he's got a lot of friends right behind him. And Johnson, again, like you said, Cooper Johnson does find himself running up in the battle for a 5th place. A top 5 make that at the end of the race. He's got to get by the 77 of Trevor Edwards, which Trevor Edwards has fallen off the pace quite a bit since the restart. It hasn't come down to pit road, so it's definitely the old tires meet new tires in that scenario. Christopher Morse Jr., speaking of which, he's got a bit of a handful now. We were wondering, how fast would Landon Huffman be after getting contact and spinning? I think we know. It didn't hurt him in the slightest. He's going for the lead of the race now to the inside of Christopher Morse.
I'm ready to take all my data on the 75 and just throw it out the window because I'm at a complete perplexity as far as the speed he has in that machine. As you mentioned, spun out to bring the last caution out. He is on 24 lap older tires than Christopher Morse Jr. And the last couple of laps, he has run 2 to 3 tenths faster than the 3 machine. Where is this speed coming from? I have no idea, but it's propelled Landon Huffman back to the point with 10 laps to go.
And to that extent, Ryan Lutz in a similar position. He's on, like we said, 100 and plus lap old tires on the left side of the car and old tires on the right side of the car. Didn't come down to pit that last time by. You wouldn't know it either. He's running a very fast third place position, and he is now catching the 2 leaders. Although Christopher Morse Jr. trying to find some extra speed in that 3 car, he's not giving up the fight quite yet as he's still tracking down the 75.
Right now, it's going to be 3 drivers, barring a caution coming out here in the latter stages of this race to settle it out. Huffman in the 75 has led the most laps here tonight. Ryan Lutz has led pretty much the rest of them, but Christopher Morse Jr. popped up towards the front in the latter stages of this race. Pretty much you're looking at the 3 dominant cars of the night, and how perfect is it that the 3 of them are separated by half a second and only have 8 more circuits to settle it out.
It's been a long race for these drivers. It's the longest race of the season, but we wouldn't have known it going to the end of this race. We have run the most laps under green this race that we've had all season long. Only 2 yellow flags so far, and that made up, what, a total of maybe 7 to 8 laps? The rest of it, completely green. So this race has flown by given the length of it, but you got to admit these drivers are probably the most tired they've been at the end of a race. Look at Lutz. Lutz is not content to hang behind the 3 car. He wants to get second place. He has a dominant car. He has led the most laps of this race. He needs to get back to the front. But right now, Morse not making it easy for him as he forces his way to the inside of this contact. Moves Morse up the racetrack and gets the position, but Morse holds on to it.
And right there, folks, that is a case of I want to pass you, but I don't want to wreck you. Ryan Lutz, in effect, was the one that spun the 3 car out, but he was also the one that straightened the 3 car back out as well. Ryan Lutz will take that second position. What could have been a wrecked race car for Christopher Morse Jr. is still running in 3rd place, all in part really to the 36.
Man, that's some good sportsmanship. He needed to get around him, but he didn't want to, like you said, didn't want to spin him and hit him in the outside wall. So good save on the part of the 3 and good sportsmanship on the part of Lutz to say, he didn't mean to do that, but he had to do what he had to do. Huffman's opening up a gap now, coming down to 5 laps to go. He's got a 1.2 second gap back to Lutz, and it's extending. It's now a 1.3 second gap at the line. So right now, Lutz has got to put on the jets if he wants to get up to Landon Huffman.
If he can't get up to Huffman, this might be our best battle coming back to the checkered flag. Hank Steinmiller looks in his rearview mirror, sees the 0-2 of Jake Houndshell. 4th place position under contest right now. Houndshell looks high, nothing there. Will he look low into turn 3? Nope, he's going to run about a half groove higher on entry on Hank Steinmiller. Try and see if we can get the run off the corner, maybe for a crossover on the front straightaway.
This is a good run on the part of Jake Houndshell. He's needed to put together a good run this season. He's done indeed that here tonight, battling for a 4th place position. And if the Lutz and Morse situation happened any different, we could see him in the top 3. So great rebound tonight after the season he's had. So Jake Houndshell looking to pad his stats in the point standings. Tucks to the inside. Oh, there might have been a little bit of contact on the way in, but moves the 63 up the racetrack. To the inside goes the 0-2. Can he get the pass done? No. Steinmiller on the outside with a run down to the drag race. Still Steinmiller on the outside.
Both these drivers are on equal set of tires, 22 laps on their Goodyears, so they're both on equal grounding. As these two get side by side, they're slowing each other down. That's going to bring Trevor Edwards in. 3-man fight for a spot inside of the top 5.
This is a big, crucial moment for Trevor Edwards' first start of the...
Oh, man, Houndshell pushing up
Woo!
there in 3 and 4. These guys are trying to bring out that late race caution.
Oh, that was 3 wide. Are we gonna go 3 wide down the front straightaway? We are in the grass. Goes the 77, and it's time up in the wall. It flips over into turn 1, and that's gonna be a late race yellow with just 2 laps to go. We are going to green, white, checkered. Holy cow!
Steinmiller's car was grabbed by the wall and flipped over. That's the second time we've seen a driver hit the outside wall, and the outside wall, I mean, I don't know what it is, but when Jose Medina wrecked over in turn 1, it shot him back down the racetrack. For Hank Steinmiller, it shot his car up into the air, up and over, barrel rolled back onto its wheels, and we've got a green-white checkered incoming.
It had to end that way. You know, a race of this magnitude had to end that way. A great battle for all these drivers, and now we get to see these top drivers duke it out the way that it should have been in a close-knit battle. Do any of them come down pit road? I don't think anyone's come down pit road. They're too scared to, I imagine. They don't want to give up this track position. Holy cow, a flipped car. Steinmiller is smoking going down the back straightaway. His night is over. It's a shame because Steinmiller has such a good run going. You didn't want to have it end that way. Just unfortunate for him. Looks like we had a couple of people faking that we were coming out of pit road, but let's stay on the racetrack. Seth, what are we going to see? It's come down to this.
It definitely has. Oh, man. I mean, as far as the top 3, I have no idea. Because, as I said, I was expecting Landon Huffman was out of this thing based on the fact he had those worn tires. He was able to work his way back up to the front. Ryan Lutz was starting to chisel away at Landon Huffman's lead, but now he's going to be right in the back door, and you've still got the fresher tire advantage between the top 3, advantage to the 3 of Christopher Morse Jr.
I'm seeing something on the bottom of the racetrack. Notice where they're running. I completely forgot. These guys are on fumes at this point. Remember,
oh, yeah.
The window was 50 to 55 laps. We are well over that at this stage in the race. These drivers last pit at 150 to 151. Maybe the latest drivers pitted at 153. You can see Huffman. You can see the 77 Edwards. They're on the inside of the racetrack. They just need fuel to get to their car. They're clutching. They're stopping and starting the engines again. This pacing is torture for these drivers, and likely so too Lutz and Morse. They're in a similar position, although Morse a little bit easier because he pitted a little later. But, Seth, do they make it to the finish is the question.
As if we didn't have enough things to think about here in this green-white checkered. Oh my heavens. You talked about it at the top of the program, Anthony. This is an endurance race. And usually in these endurance races, it comes down maybe to the last couple drops of fuel in the tank. That might be the case here tonight. You saw your top 5. Hank Steinmiller still running around the racetrack, albeit smoking. I mean, why not? That car's probably not going to finish any worse than 11th place here tonight, as Jason Houndshell at the last moment going to get another lucky dog. He will be back on the lead lap and maybe be able to salvage a top 10 finish. But the way they line up, it's Huffman in the lead, Ryan Lutz in second, Christopher Morse Jr. in third. These 3 have been the cars out in front for the entirety of the night. You've got Trevor Edwards now in 4th, Jake Houndshell 5th, Cooper Johnson there in 6th with Jackson McLaren 7th, Chuck Sweeting in 8th, and I believe Seth Harrelson came down pit road, so Steinmiller's 9th, Harrelson on fresh tires there in 10th. Keep an eye on him to make a late charge, maybe up into the top 5, and Jason Houndshell will now be the last driver on the lead lap in 11th position. Anthony, green-white checkers rules. They have to get back to that white flag, and they've only got one attempt.
And they have a lot on their minds going into this green-white checker. We're going to take them back to green on lap 204 of our now extended 205-lap race. They have got tires that they need to contend with. A lot of these drivers out on extremely old tires, that being part of Ryan Lutz on very old lefts. We have got fuel. which I, again, forgot that they had that happen, that they needed to go to the end of the race. So they have to make it another 2 laps. And the way that I've been seeing Huffman and Lutz weave their cars, it's not very promising for Huffman more than anyone else, because he was one of the first to come down to pit road after that last cycle on a lap 151. So he's got the longest stretch, and if he wants to make it, this caution has certainly helped him. We have 2 laps to go. He's stacking the field up. We're about ready to go back to green. What does Huffman do? When does he run out of gas? Do we get back to the line? Green flag back on the air for 2 laps.
Got himself up through the gears very nicely, opens up some distance between himself and Ryan Lutz. Lutz, in turn, opened up a gap back to Christopher Morse Jr., who's now in the clutches of Trevor Edwards for the 3rd position. The question is fuel. Do they have enough? Out of turn 2 comes Landon Huffman, down the back straightaway, trying to get to that white flag as quickly as he can.
Ryan Lutz trying to close in the gap, but Morse is now in a battle between him and Trevor Edwards, as Edwards now gets the pass done on the 3 machine. Move him up to 3rd place as they come to take the white flag of the race. It's all Huffman at the front of the field. Now, can he get to the end of the race? Did he save enough fuel under pacing to make it to the end? We'll have to wait. We still got about 75% of a lap to go.
He's got 0.5 of a second back to Ryan Lutz. He might just need fumes if he can get into turn 3 to get back to the start-finish line. He was a Truck Series driver for Nice Motorsports and Young Motorsports, an ARCA Menard Series driver for Venturini Motorsports. He can add this to his resume. He's a G-Force 87 Cup Series winner here tonight in the World 300 at Charlotte.
He made the fuel last. He made the tires last. He recovered from a spin in the race. He brought out our 2nd yellow. He got a lot of damage on the left side of the car, or made that the right side of the car, and somehow, some way, stays out, gets enough fuel, and holds off everybody, and you couldn't have had a better restart if you had tried. That was textbook driving on the part of the 75 team.
All right, so the questions, the trigger flag's out, but the questions are still there. Does he have enough fuel to do a burnout? Let's wait and see, because Landon Huffman, as we know, he and the rest of the top 5 seem to be very concerned about fuel for this final restart. But Huffman in the grass, gonna start doing his burnouts here tonight at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Couple of heartbreaks there on that final green-white checkered as well. Hank Steinmiller brought his car down pit lane, retired out of the race in 11th place. And we talked about Chuck Sweeting having connection problems early in this race. They settled out. They reared their ugly head in the closing stages. He fell out on that green-white checkered. Will bring it home in 10th place here tonight.
Still a top 10, though, for Chuck Sweeting. And given how this race started out for him and having the connection issues earlier in the race, it could have ended much worse. So a little bit of consolation for his efforts, but definitely not the night he wanted to have. But if you look at the top 5, he must have had more fuel than I thought he did, because he's been able to stay out there and do his burnouts a lot longer. But Landon Huffman pulls off a stretch of a win, to say the least. Ryan Lutz and Trevor Edwards right at the top 3. Then you have Morse Jr., Jake Hounshaw. That's your top 5. But then look at this. Cooper Johnson, again, a top 10 finish. Something that he's been consistent on so far this season. Jackson McLaren gets 7th place after everything's settled. Seth Harrelson, Jason Hounshaw, and then Chuck Sweeting in 10th place. So a very diverse-looking top 10. Certainly one that we didn't have at the start of the race, because a lot of our front runners early on ran into very early troubles.
And, you know, I go back to the old moniker that I seem to use and maybe overuse, but in these type of races, you run all the laps. Jason Hounshaw 50 laps ago was 2 laps down. Got 2 yellow flags between then and the checkered flag, and he brings it home inside the top 10 on the lead lap in the 9th position. A great run there tonight for Jason Hounshaw in his first full-time season.
Absolutely. Definitely a bit of wherewithal to know that he has to stay out, and it really is. You never know what kind of positions you'll get if you just stay out. Some drivers that ran into some woes, however, John Whitendorf, the second car that was part of our second yellow tonight, he finds himself in 13th place, will undoubtedly be hurt in the point standings. I don't think it's enough to lose the point standings, enough to lose the lead in the points. However, Christopher Morse Jr. with his second, or maybe his fourth place finish tonight, will definitely close the gap. Another driver that was high up in the point standings that is going to have bad luck, and partly the reason why Morse is going to gain so much is Gerald Campbell went out early in the race, finishes 55 laps down to the leader. He will round out the day in 18th. Anthony Graneri as well. Tough break for the 16 car. Had a strong car at the beginning of the race, and then it was part of our first yellow flag, and ended up finishing 136 laps. I'm sorry, make that 64 laps down to our leader at the end of the race. But those drivers came in with a lot riding on their shoulders, and unfortunately, Charlotte was one of the races that they would like to forget heading out of it.
Absolutely, and of course, as we mentioned as well, it was a track that Christopher Morse Jr. had won here 1 year ago, so maybe a little bit of an advantage in terms of knowing how to win at this racetrack coming into tonight. Not only that, a couple of unknowns in the following upcoming weeks, with Sonoma next week, Eldora the following week, two tracks that were not on the schedule last season and thusly do not have a defending winner going into them. So if you're guys like John Whitendorf and Gerald Campbell and Anthony Guarneri, who came running well in the point standings here into tonight, do you see the outside of the top 15 finishes here tonight for some of these guys as a missed opportunity heading into those unknown tracks in the upcoming weeks?
It's definitely going to be interesting for them going forward, knowing that we're kind of running into those unique races in the season. You've kind of lost a bit of familiarity with these races. Normally, we've seen these drivers, they get kind of comfortable running as they do, and this is the last race until Texas that sense of normality is gone. So knowing that they could have had an opportunity but just missed out on it, that's got to be kicking themselves a little bit harder this race, knowing that the next couple of races are extreme unknowns. They do get to go to Texas after it's all said and done. So that would be the first race back into the more normal type of racing that we've seen. But a big question mark for a lot of these drivers that did have that unfortunate luck in Charlotte. But you never know. They might surprise us. Maybe these drivers are a bit better at these tracks than we thought they were.
Absolutely. Well, we have unknowns. They may not, but we now want to see if we can get the mindset of the top three finishers here tonight. Hopefully we'll get to talk with third place finisher Trevor Edwards and tonight's winner Landon Huffman. We do, however, have three-time winner this season and tonight's runner-up from Charlotte Motor Speedway, Ryan Lutz. So let's talk with him now. Hey, Ryan, it's Anthony and Seth up here in the FRN booth. You got us?
Yeah, man.
Wow, I mean, what a race here tonight. Certainly a race of longevity, an endurance race for you guys, but you had a strong race car out there, and at certain points it looked like your car might be the third fastest. Then at other points it looked like the second fastest. Then it looked like it was the fastest. But I want to go back to that call for the two-tire strategy, not once, but twice. It looked like that car was just as fast with two fresh tires as it had been with four fresh tires.
Yeah, we had them beat. This one hurts a little bit, but we outsmarted them again, and I really thought that was our race, and I was gutted when I saw the caution because we were out of tires and we were a sitting duck, man. But if that caution didn't come, we were gonna force second landing and win the race. But I mean, these cars, man, I don't know what it is about right sides, but I did the same thing at Phoenix, and I told Hank again, just like I did at Phoenix, man, right sides, I'm telling you, is gonna win the race tonight. That those 7 seconds or whatever it was to shorten the pit stop it makes such a big difference when the tires equal out. Man, I really thought it was it.
We really didn't see your tires fall off that much the race, and I guess that is attributed to the right sides that you took on instead of all the left side tires. So it makes sense. But this race seemed a bit different in the sense that the track seemed that it was a lot easier to drive for these drivers, especially most of the drivers in the top to make the top 8 that we've seen all season long. What was it about Charlotte tonight that just seemed like you could plant your car wherever you wanted to? Because we got into some massive green flag runs, and it spread out the field. And to your point, it did make tire strategy a bit easier to play around with. So what was it about tonight's race that really was able to have these cars be a lot more stable than we've seen them in weeks prior?
Well, I think it was just the mixture of a really, really bad setup to a really cold track. It seemed like I know the setup wasn't good at all. It was really, really tight, had no gear in it. Landon was shifting halfway through those runs, and I started finding out he was towards the end there. And by the time I figured it out. He already had it mastered, but it's just the gear was too tall. So at the end of the straightaways, you didn't have enough RPM. So it made for a really momentum race, which made it for a long green flag runs. I knew in practice when I felt it that it was definitely going to be green flag runs there for sure. And I knew Landon was going to be really good. I'm really good friends with him. He sponsors me in other leagues, and he's always good in these vintage cars. And I knew the only shot we had really was to play a pit strategy, and we did, and it almost worked out.
All right, so Ryan, I want to take the opportunity here now, based off the fact that here tonight is the last track, at least for the next couple of weeks, that the 87 cars have been at back in season 1. Next 2 weeks, we're going to tracks that were not on the schedule last season. We've got no prior knowledge here in terms of statistics for the series, but we want to get a driver's point of view. You've got a road course stop at Sonoma next week, then you go to the dirt track of Eldora the following week. What's your expectations for these 87 cars, how they're going to handle at a road course and at a dirt track?
I'm pumped up. I did a couple road courses in Elite when I was over there when they were running the vintage, and we were really good there. I finished second at Watkins Glen, so I have some experience at it. I know it's a lot of fun. I heard a lot of guys are testing already, and I'm sure me and Hank will do a little practice session together, and hopefully we'll be pretty good. I'm excited about Eldora. I'm a pretty big dirt guy myself. I enjoy it. I can't say I'm the greatest, but I enjoy it. So that's definitely one we have circled, and we should hopefully cap off some more big point runs and hopefully have a shot at it.
Well, Ryan, congratulations on a solid outing here tonight. Undoubtedly one of the strongest cars here this evening between yourself, the 75, and the 3. You guys stayed up front pretty much the entirety of this race. I know it's a bittersweet top 3 finish for you here tonight. I know you wanted to win this one, but congratulations nonetheless on a solid performance all night long. I mean, it's tough enough to keep yourself in competition in a 200-lapper, let alone be there in the conversation at the end for the victory. So well done on that. We're going to give you the opportunity now for some thank you sponsors and shout-outs.
Yeah, just everyone at Flatout Racing Network, you, Seth, you, Matt, you, everyone that just puts us on, man. Chris does an awesome league. It's not a lot of guys, but it's definitely a group of good guys, and I definitely have a lot of fun racing with these guys. It's not always about the big fields. It's about the racing quality, and it's definitely there here. And just Backflip Podcast, Chris Dilbeck Racing, my girlfriend, she's always watching. Everyone at Country Roads Motorsports, I think we're pretty close on the team points now that I beat Chris there, and just everyone that puts this deal on, man. I'm looking forward to next week, and hopefully we can keep this point momentum going.
That's Ryan Lutz, second place here tonight in the World 300 at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Once again, congratulations, Ryan, and we're looking forward to seeing what you and the other 87 drivers bring to the table in the first road course track of the season at Sonoma.
All right, thanks, man. Appreciate it, guys.
And so that is going to conclude our coverage here tonight. Looks like we are not going to have our third and winner here tonight for a post-race interview, but great performance there for Landon Huffman winning tonight's race. Trevor Edwards with that last-minute move on the green-white checker to slip past Christopher Morris Jr. for the final spot on the podium, bookending Ryan Lutz, the 3-time winner this season. Anthony, first off, let's recap here tonight. You talked about it. Humongous long green flag runs, only 3 cautions splitting up these 200 laps. It really came down to who had the strongest car on the long run.
And the last caution came at the very end of the race, so theoretically it was only 2 yellow flags that really was the what set these drivers up for the green flag runs, and we definitely saw which drivers were set up to have the long run. Now, this is a fixed setup league, so no one was able to really mess with their setups as far as a day to night transition race, but however, the driving style did change, and we saw some drivers creep to the front of the field that we wouldn't have necessarily mentioned at the beginning of the race. For example, Jake Hounshell in 5th place. I don't think we would have mentioned his name in the first half of the race, but the second half of the race with the combination of the 2 yellows that had come out with the 3 yellows at the very end of the race, plus the fact that he was a lot stronger in the end of the race, he did make up a lot of ground. Cooper Johnson, Jackson McLaren, same story. So they definitely were able to put themselves into a position to get to that fifth, sixth, and seventh place, and then everyone behind them kind of shuffled in line. A lot of drivers with heartache tonight, but Seth, not only that, but we saw that pit road was really the deciding factor amongst our top three. Brian Lutz, the only driver to really wholesale do the two-tire strategy, except for his teammate Hank Steinmiller. We saw how it worked out for Steinmiller. He had a fast car. Unfortunately, it was the reason for our third caution, but the pit strategy, going forward, do these drivers consider using pit strategy, especially a two-tire stop, more frequently, now knowing that Lutz was able to make it work, and certainly Landon Huffman, after spinning and cooking all of his tires, seeing how he was able to keep speed?
I think it's really going to vary on the track itself. I mean, here tonight we ended up seeing where there was maybe about a second difference between 50-lap-old tires to the fastest lap they had run in the race. There have been tracks we've been to here this season that have been tire killers. You go back to Atlanta, you look at Phoenix. These are tracks where we see anywhere from 2 to maybe even 3.5 seconds difference in lap times from the old tires to the fastest lap. So I think here tonight, based off of two things. Number one, the fact that this track in particular, as we heard from Ryan Lutz, how it seemed like the setup didn't really give these drivers a lot of options in terms of how they were able to approach the racetrack, which could have also played into drivers maybe wearing their tires down a little bit sooner than others. And also the constant track temperature. You know, we followed it from the start of the race down to the end of the race. We started about 82 degrees. When we looked near the end of the race, we were only down to 78, 79 degrees. So there was not a whole lot of track temperature change that went on. With not a drastic temperature change, the tire wear stayed basically the same, making it easy for drivers to be able to figure out, well, these tires were this way at the beginning of the race. They'll probably be about the same here with about 20 laps to go. Kind of made it easy in terms of strategy, knowing that the lap times were consistent. But to be honest, I think it's really going to vary as we go down the stretch here. If we come to another track that's very similar in terms of track temperature and not a whole lot of fluctuation, absolutely. Drivers will be going with the two-tire strategy, but not sure which track really that's going to be, especially considering the tracks we got coming up here. Not only Sonoma and Eldora, but we've also got the Legacy Texas coming up, which can usually be very tough on those good years.
Indeed so. And if you ask any race team in the history of forever, the one thing that they're going to say that they value the most over anything else, and that's going to be consistency. They want to know what will happen. They want to know when it will happen, and they want to know how the car will react every single time, and they want to be able to know it 200 laps in advance. This race proved that you can have that happen, but as we said, the season is getting a bit spicy going into the next couple of weeks. We've mentioned it tonight, but Seth, Sonoma and Eldora, 2 monkey wrenches. Texas, the Legacy Texas, not as huge as a monkey wrench. However, it is the before the reprofiling where turns 1 and 2 isn't so wide and it has more banking. So it's going to be a little bit more like Charlotte where we were tonight. Then we go back to Daytona and we saw what chaos happened at the beginning of the season. We get to go back for the Firecracker 200. That's going to be a bit of a wild card race as Talladega was last week. So these drivers, they like consistency and they like knowing what will happen. They're not going to know what's going to happen the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to maybe try and look at a couple of drivers to watch next week at Sonoma, we'd have to kind of maybe look at the finishing results of last season, the only road course stop at Watkins Glen. John Whitendorf was the winner of that race. Gerald Campbell finished in 3rd. Christopher Morse Jr. finished in 4th. Are these our road course ringers? Who knows? Because there's some new blood that came into the series here in Season 2. There could be some sleepers there, some really good road course racers in that mix. So, and of course, the fact, too, that this is the first time on the schedule Sonoma makes an appearance. So, with all those X factors thrown in, we're probably not even going to know until we get the opportunity to maybe observe practice and qualifying at the start of next week's race of who the drivers really are to watch, as Sonoma is definitely not anywhere close to the way you would approach Watkins Glen. So a lot of question marks going into Sonoma, but we're going to get to find them all out, all the answers together, and that should be a good one next week. Can't wait to see how these drivers approach the left and right-hand turns of the first road course stop of the season.
I can't wait to go to a road course. I love road course racing. Not so good racing road courses anymore, but I love watching them still as I have progressively gotten more and more off the sim. My lap time's not so good, but I love watching them. So love to see the cars go around, and I love Sonoma. Sonoma gets underused quite a bit, and I would really love to see. If you haven't seen a GT race at Sonoma, I encourage you, go watch the GT Series race at Sonoma. It's a treat, even though there's usually only 11 or 12 cars to take the start. Getting to see someone throw around a Lamborghini around Sonoma is something a little magical. Not gonna lie, but Seth, we got a long season to go still, and as far as points go, a lot of questions still to be answered, but we have a pretty good idea who our contenders are coming out of this race, and I can't wait to see what we on the road to Atlanta, what we're going to see by the time we get to the end of the season.
Absolutely. It's really starting to get down to crunch time for these drivers now as they're trying to formulate a plan to be able to catch John Whitendorf for the points lead and try and see if at the end of the season they can hoist that championship trophy. If you're enjoying this battle here in the series, please join us next week at Sonoma for the first road course stop of the season. Or if you're like Anthony, you just like road courses, be sure to show up next week and check out the 11th race on the season. Anthony, it's been a great one here tonight under the lights at Charlotte Motor Speedway, a long one. Hopefully everyone stuck around for the finish. Appreciate you joining me here for these entire 200 laps.
It's always fun to do a longer race. I absolutely love longer races, and love doing it with you because we have this little dynamic going, and I like spending 2.5 hours of my life with you every week. So it's super fun to do these races, and I love watching these drivers. They're absolutely talented, and I can't wait for next week.
Absolutely. We hope you guys enjoyed our coverage here tonight. Tune in tomorrow night as we're getting down to the end of the season, the third season for the Dark Horse IndyCar Series presented by HyperX. They take to the Tricky Triangle. And then Thursday night, we bring you the All-Star Race Super Speedway style for the RTG Tally Challenge. The qualifiers are in. The field is set. All that's on the line now is an opportunity to be able to say you were an all-star race winner in Rolling Thunder Gaming. All that's coming up here as we near the end of the week. For Anthony McCurry, I'm Seth Cole. Thanks for joining us here tonight as Landon Huffman's your winner in the World 300. You've been watching another broadcast courtesy of the Flatout Racing Network.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of Flatout Racing Network and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Flatout Racing Network and iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations. Flatout Racing Network would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast.